This is a compilation of Half-Life lore I have created over the past few years. No intros, no outros, just lore. Enjoy. Here, we explore Half-Life's biggest mystery through the lore, story, and theories behind the G-Man. The border world of Xen offered incredible power, connection, and sanctuary to whoever or whatever controlled it, shifting across realities and dimensions. Xen connected to many worlds, becoming home to creatures like Barnacles, the Nylanth, the Vortigaunt, and Houndai. Nothing was native to Xen. It picked up life as new worlds connected to it. As one of these, the Nylanth, a being of incredible power, found sanctuary and dominance in Xen after its species was wiped out by the Combine, a union of nightmares. Back on Earth, around the 1960s or 70s, the Black Mesa Research Facility discovered Xen through teleportation experiments. Survey teams were sent to explore, document, and bring back samples, despite the dangers. The crystals they found here were composed of both normal and exotic matter, the latter consisting of antimass. To study these, Dr. Rosenberg designed the anti-mass spectrometer, which was constructed in Sector C for the anomalous materials team to use. During this period, the extent of the G-Man and his employer's influence over Black Mesa's discovery of Xen remains unknown. He was part of a secret interdimensional organization that worked in the shadows. At the top were the employers. Below them, the agents. This is the position the G-Man held, and below them, the soldiers hired to complete tasks. These soldiers, stored in stasis outside of space-time after they were hired, were unaware that they were pawns in a larger game. Their contracts sold to the highest bidder for their services. What the currency or goals were remain mostly unknown, yet as the story continued, several of these goals and hired agents were revealed, showcasing the G-Man and his employer's ability to manipulate humanity, space, and time. As certain events had to occur to complete their contracts, agents such as the G-Man watched from a distance to intervene if necessary if deviations from a plan happened. Essentially, he was a glorified babysitter. The actions of the G-Man are pretty much unknown before around May of a year in the early 2000s. After this point, his appearances became more prominent and direct as his mysterious employers had a goal in mind. They wanted control of the border world of Xen, a goal that would change everything. With power over time, they saw a timeline in which they could make this possible. They just had to nudge certain people to make this a reality. The G-Man got his name from his appearance as a regular G-Man. He was secret, authoritative, and wore a suit. He appeared to be a member of the United States government with a high security clearance. He was known to and had some sway over Dr. Wallace Breen, the administrator of Black Mesa. Regardless of how he obtained this position, he used the power to his advantage. His briefcase contained an identity card, a handgun, pencils, and a sheet of paper. He appeared to be human with a high level of control, or something that mimicked the appearance of a human. This is something that will be explored later. To secure control over Xen, the Nylanth had to be taken out. In order to do this, several things had to be set in motion. On May the 3rd, the G-Man traveled to the Santiago military base. From reports of some of the Marines there, they believed he was from a secret branch of the government in search of recruits. To those in charge, he requested a team trained in indoor strategic combat for a mission at the Black Mesa Research Facility. A few days later, on May 7th, he returned to the base and appeared to focus his attention mostly on one of the recruits, Corporal Adrian Shepard. To Shepard, he looked more like a lawyer or insurance agent. On May the 9th, the Marines were told that they would spend the next week training at the combat simulation facility for a mission, and from rumors, they heard the name Black Mesa. With the Hazardous Environment Combat Unit in training, on around May 11th, a Zenian crystal sample, GG-3883, was delivered to Black Mesa. According to Dr. Rosenberg and Dr. Keller, it was delivered under mysterious circumstances. It has not been confirmed who this was delivered by, but it is believed it was brought in by the G-Man. Dr. Colette Green later evaluated this sample and discovered that it was the purest and largest sample they had acquired so far from Zen. Because of this, the Office of the Administrator ordered that it replace sample EP0021 in an upcoming experiment. The Office of the Administrator also ordered that to study the sample properly, because of its size and purity, they would have to violate the normal anomalous materials handling protocol and adjust the safety parameters of the anti-mass spectrometer. This order put stress on the team as they attempted to prepare for their test in time. As May 15th arrived, it was confirmed to the HECU that their upcoming mission would take place at the Black Mesa Research Facility. They just had to wait for it to happen, whatever it was. Corporal Adrian Shepard would also be on this team. With the crystal sample GG-3883 in place to be tested, the HECU prepared to be sent out for an event, and an even more secret team, the Black Ops, were on standby for another secret mission. Over in Zen, the Nylanth appeared to also be aware of something on the horizon. This creature had escaped the torture of the Combine and sought out a new home to hide from them. It was also aware of the G-Man, that he was not a man at all but something else. It was aware of the human survey teams that had traveled to Zen and waited for an opportunity to send through its slave army of Vortigaunt to claim Earth for itself. There were also other factors at play. Dr. Gordon Freeman was scheduled to deliver the crystal sample into the beam of the anti-mass spectrometer. This was essential to their plan. Race X would discover Earth through Zen and various other smaller factors that may or may not have also been manipulated through the efforts of this secret interdimensional organization. The G-Man and his employers had put everything in place they needed to claim Zen. They just had to make sure everything played out as they planned. A regular experiment in Sector C of Black Mesa was normally stressful, yet with a sample of a much larger size and purity, the anomalous materials team were under significantly more pressure. The administrator wanted conclusive results for this sample, and to achieve this, they had adapted the safety parameters and decided to boost the anti-mass spectrometer's power to 105%. It was a gamble, but they needed the extra resolution. This gamble, they feared, could trigger a resonance cascade, but that only had a small chance of occurring. Several scientists were completely against these adjustments but were forced to proceed. As the G-Man arrived on site, he observed as blackouts knocked out entire regions of Black Mesa as a result of the additional power requirements. On his tram ride in, he took note of Dr. Gordon Freeman, someone who would be invaluable to the plan ahead. As he arrived in Sector C, he had a heated discussion with one of the scientists. While it is unknown what this argument was actually about, as it was muffled to anyone outside of the room, it is believed that it was related to the increased power usage of the anti-mass spectrometer. Increasing it from 90% to 105% was a risky move. Despite the complaints of the team, the experiment moved ahead. Freeman entered the test chamber, activated the anti-mass spectrometer, and waited for the crystal sample to arrive. Meanwhile, the G-Man approached a very cautious Dr. Alyx Vance and warned him to prepare for unforeseen consequences. Eli had thought about stopping the experiment, but even in this moment, he chose to follow the orders of the administrator anyway. As foreseen, the G-Man watched as Dr. Gordon Freeman pushed the crystal sample, GG-3883, into the beam of the anti-mass spectrometer, and it shattered. The exotic energy inside flooded the chamber with the energy the anomalous materials team had sought to analyze. This chain reaction triggered a resonance cascade that ripped open a tear in space between Earth and Zen. Just as planned by the G-Man and his employers, the Nilanth teleported its slave army of Vortigaunt through to Earth inside the Black Mesa facility to secure it as a new home, safe from the Combine. With Zen connected to Earth, the G-Man turned his attention to Dr. Gordon Freeman. The right man in the wrong place could make all the difference in the world, and this scientist would ensure their control over Zen. As Gordon began his journey across Black Mesa, the G-Man came across the daughter of Dr. Alyx Vance, Alyx. Her mother had already died in this disaster as the Vortigaunt and creatures of Zen had fallen into the facility. As he looked at her, he saw something special. His employers told him that she was just a mere child of no practical use to anyone, but he thought differently. The G-Man ignored the worries of his employers and plucked her out of Black Mesa to safety. Over the following hours, the personnel of Black Mesa were massacred by headcrabs, bullsquid, barnacles, vortigaunt, and the other hostile lifeforms of Zen. Meanwhile, Gordon Freeman discovered that he was a natural with a crowbar and the various other weaponry he found on his journey through Black Mesa. All he wanted to do was reach the surface to call for help. With Gordon on track, the G-Man's second plan came into play. The HECU were alerted that it had happened and they were dispatched to Black Mesa. Unfortunately, the Osprey holding Adrian was shot down, and when he awoke, he was completely unaware of what his orders actually were, as they were planned to have been given to him upon his arrival. The HECU were ordered to clean up the experiments that had gone wrong at Black Mesa. This meant they had to kill every alien lifeform and any witness with knowledge of what had happened there. As the G-Man was behind the arrival of this team, it could be suggested that he and his employers had planned the Black Mesa incident to be a self-contained event. Yet, as the hours passed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. If anything, maybe there were consequences that even the G-Man and his employers had not foreseen. From a distance, the G-Man watched Gordon and Adrian closely. Gordon grew more confident and survived several events. He ran, he thought, he shot, and he lived through scenarios that had killed many of his co-workers. Even after the arrival of the HECU, Gordon took them out one by one. As for Adrian, he showed the ability to adapt and survive against all odds, traits that reminded the G-Man of himself. As a result of the continued arrival of Zenian reinforcements and Freeman's killing spree, the HECU decided to pull out and save whoever they could. Having heard the call, Adrian raced to the evacuation point. However, Adrian still had a role to play as a pawn in the plan of the G-Man and his employers. So, the G-Man closed the hangar door that led to the Osprey, and he was left behind. As each minute passed, the Zenian forces overwhelmed and dominated the hallways of Black Mesa. Gordon was eventually told that something on Zen held open the tear between their world and the border world. Having survived deadly scenarios and against the odds, he was sent through to Zen to take it out. In a baptism of fire, a simple scientist had been forged into a soldier under the watchful eye and guidance from afar of the G-Man. With Gordon on Zen as planned, the G-Man once again turned his attention to Corporal Adrian Shepard. He and the few survivors of the HECU had come across the Black Ops, a safety net sent in to rid Black Mesa of all alien life and human survivors. Adrian also discovered the thermonuclear device they had brought with them to do this. To give himself and the other survivors a chance to escape, he disarmed the device. However, shortly after, the G-Man reactivated it. Each stage of his incident appeared to have been meticulously planned, and these little deviations were fixed quickly. Adrian later killed the Gene Worm, one of the most important members of the Race X species, a goal he had been guided towards since the G-Man had spotted him that day at the Santiago military base. Upon its death, a portal storm pulled Adrian into somewhere new. The G-Man looked down at his recruit in what appeared to be an osprey flying through the New Mexico desert. In the distance, the thermonuclear device exploded and eradicated all life in Black Mesa. A successful cleanse of those who had any idea of what had happened. The osprey then brought him to his new home, Stasis. Throughout this incident, the G-Man had teleported all across Black Mesa to ensure that specific actions occurred at the right time and that there was no deviation from the plan. Nevertheless, he still had two loose ends to tie up after the destruction of Black Mesa. He told the corporal that he admired his ability to adapt and survive against all odds. His employers, on the other hand, did not trust that Adrian would keep everything he had seen to himself, one of those human temptations they had observed. So, the G-Man had offered them an alternative, to preserve Adrian in stasis as an agent for a mission in the future. There, he could be stored safely so that he could cause no harm and no harm could come to him. A choice that had been made for Adrian. In doing so, the G-Man had hired a new recruit against his will, whose services could be sold off. With Adrian dealt with, the G-Man had one more loose end: Freeman. Over in Zen, the Nylanth understood what had happened and how its loss of control over Zen had been manufactured by something that was not a man. The creature also knew that this entity waited for Gordon. Regardless, the Nylanth put up a fight against the scientist, but it was not enough. The death of the Nylanth triggered many events. Gordon was pulled from danger by the G-Man. The entity removed Gordon's weapons as he claimed they were government property. He told Freeman that because of his actions, the border world of Zen was under his and his employer's control. The plan had worked and they had got what they wanted. His employers were also impressed by Gordon Freeman's actions during this incident and wanted to offer him a job. The specifications of this job were not explained, and Gordon actually did not have a choice. He either stepped into a portal created by the G-Man, or he was offered a battle he had no chance of winning. Gordon would be an incredibly valuable asset in the future. With this Hobson's choice, Gordon entered the portal, and he too, just like Adrian, was stored in stasis for future use. For the most part, the taking of Zen was successful. Not only had the G-Man and his employers acquired access to a border world with connections to so many worlds, but they had also hired two strong assets, Dr. Gordon Freeman and Corporal Adrian Shepard. The Black Mesa incident was a perfectly orchestrated moment in human history. But for the G-Man, it was a worthy sacrifice for the control of Zen. But why did he send Gordon to fight while having control over space and time? Well, the Nylanth and the Vortigaunt had control over an energy source called the Vortessence. The Vortigaunt, as slaves of the Nylanth, were able to use the power to limit or even completely remove his abilities. On one occasion in the future, this green energy was used to hold the G-Man in place without access to any of his powers. so it made sense why they sent Freeman. It appeared that the G-Man and his employers had done everything in their power to limit the aftermath and even the knowledge of this incident, which begs the question, was the arrival of the Combine on Earth an unforeseen consequence of the acquisition of Xen? The resonance cascade had alerted the Combine Empire of the existence of planet Earth. Just as they had done to so many other planets, they attacked and conquered it with their vast army. Over the next 20 years, humanity was subjected to some of the worst treatment imaginable as the Combine harvested what they needed from the planet. As for the G-Man and his employers over this period, their actions are unknown. Why they wanted Xen and for what reason has never been revealed. However, after 2 decades away from his planet, the employers had a new task for Gordon. As stated, the placement of Gordon could have been something the employers wanted to happen, or his services could have been paid for in a contract. Regardless, the G-Man entered stasis to put Gordon Freeman in place for a new mission.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job. No one is more deserving of a rest, and all the effort in the world would have gone to waste until... well, let's just say your hour has come again. The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
Having placed Gordon on a train 20 years after the Black Mesa incident, once again, he watched from the sidelines to make sure his soldier followed the correct path. The Combine's occupation of Earth was likely an unintended side effect of their acquisition of Xen, and at this moment in human history, the Resistance had grown just enough to finally fight back against the Combine. Gordon would be the match to trigger the powder keg that was an uprising. As he had done with the Black Mesa incident, the G-Man watched Gordon from afar and monitored his progress. From the City 17 train station to a fallen Resistance base to a broadcast screen, the G-Man observed Gordon as he caught the attention of the Combine, traversed the Underground Railroad. The entity intervened at New Little Odessa, very likely to alert Colonel Odessa Cubbage of a Combine raid on the way so that Gordon would be prepared for the assault. He observed as Freeman survived the raid of Black Mesa East and helped in the fall of Nova Prospekt. As Gordon and an adult Alyx had been inside during the explosion, and as they were not heard from for weeks after, Gordon, the hero of Black Mesa, became a martyr, the symbol of this revolution, the spark that the Resistance truly needed to trigger an uprising. Alyx had also been a very valuable companion to Gordon and member of the Resistance. It appeared that the G-Man's interference in her fate had ultimately helped this mission. Yet, Gordon and Alyx had not fallen with Nova Prospekt. They had instead entered a slow time warp after attempting to use the unstable teleporter in the prison. They arrived in Dr. Kleiner's lab 2 weeks later, just in time to see how the Resistance had finally decided to fight back against their oppressors. Shortly after, with Gordon on track, the G-Man watched as he arrived at the top of the Citadel. His actions here led to the destabilization of the dark fusion reactor that powered the Citadel, an action that led Dr. Wallace Breen to fall to his death, and the Combine to lose contact with Earth. Every Citadel across the planet shut down because of this. This may have been what the G-Man and his employers had brought Gordon here to do. Having completed his mission, the entity paused time just as an explosion threatened to take Gordon and Alyx's life.
Time, Dr. Freeman? Is it really that time again? It seems as if you only just arrived. You've done a great deal in a small time span. You've done so well, in fact, that I've received some interesting offers for your services. Ordinarily, I wouldn't contemplate them, but these are extraordinary times. Rather than offer you the illusion of free choice, I will take the liberty of choosing for you, if and when your time comes round again. I do apologize for what must seem to you an arbitrary imposition, Dr. Freeman. I trust it will all make sense to you in the course of... well, I'm really not at liberty to say. In the meantime, this is where I get off.
What was interesting about this moment, other than the fact that the G-Man had placed Gordon back in stasis after the mission to remove the Combine's access to Earth had been successful, was that he did not save Alyx this time. He had left her to her fate. It appears that she had served her purpose. As for the employment offers, it solidified that while Gordon believed he was in full control, he was not. He was simply a pawn of the G-Man. He had been pulled out of stasis to cripple the Combine's hold of Earth, and having done it, he was put back in storage. This is where the story of the G-Man and his employers becomes more interesting. Up until this point, they had maintained complete control over their assets and a clear plan of the timeline. They did not foresee the intrusion of the Vortigaunt. This species had an incredibly strong connection to the Vortessence, the power that appeared to be one of the few weaknesses of the G-Man. The Vortigaunt were also aware of him, or what he was. In their alliance with humanity against the Combine, they had formed a strong connection with the population of Earth, but they did not reveal all of their knowledge. The Vortigaunt saw Alyx and Gordon as important members of their fight against the Combine. They also had the ability to peer into the future through the Vortessence. When the Vortigaunt saw how the G-Man had once again abducted Gordon and left Alyx to a fate of certain death, they enhanced their power with Antlion extract and then froze time themselves to save her. They also entered stasis, the G-Man's prison outside of space-time that he had stored his recruits. With guards stationed at the entrance, two of the Vort tracked down Gordon. In fear that his best asset could be stolen, the G-Man entered stasis.
We'll see about that.
This intrusion showed that the G-Man not only had a weakness, but he also felt anger, a human emotion. Something of his had been stolen and released into the timeline, someone that should not have been there. It is also unclear on whether Alyx's survival was foreseen by the G-Man. The release of Gordon meant that his actions would ultimately change or adapt whatever plan this shadowy organization had. The G-Man could also not contact or manipulate Gordon as the Vortigaunt watched over him. This was a huge problem. Over the following days, the Citadel collapsed, leveled City 17, and Alyx and Gordon escaped on a train. However, on their way to a secret resistance base outside of the city, Alyx was attacked by a Combine hunter who sought them out. Alyx and Gordon had stolen some valuable information from the Combine before its collapse, and they wanted it back. As the Vortigaunt came together to save Alyx, someone they believed to be incredibly important to a moment in the future, the G-Man appeared to Gordon in this rare, distracted moment.
Dr. Freeman, I realize this moment may not be the most convenient for a heart-to-heart, but I had to wait until your friends were otherwise occupied. There was a time they cared nothing for Miss Vance, when their only experience of humanity was a crowbar coming at them down a steel corridor. When I plucked her from Black Mesa, I acted in the face of objections that she was a mere child and of no practical use to anyone. I have learned to ignore such naysayers when quelling them was out of the question. Still, I am not one to squander my investments, and I remain confident she was worth far more than the initial appraisal. That's why I must now extract from you some small repayment owed for your own survival. See her safely to White Forest, Dr. Freeman. I wish I could do more than keep an eye on you, but I have agreed to abide by certain restrictions. Well, now, listen carefully, my dear. When you see your father, relay these words. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
Having said his piece, he retreated back and began to watch again from a distance. Freeman and Alyx made their way towards White Forest, and on their way out of Victory Mine, the G-Man made his first stop at the highway outpost to make sure they were on track. This was not a part of the plan, but he and his employers had to work with the situation they had. Alyx was in possession of a data file that displayed the rough location of a missing research vessel, the Borealis. It had disappeared from its home deep underground in Aperture Science. This vessel had advanced technology on board, and when the Resistance discovered where it was, this would change everything. The warning to prepare for unforeseen consequences directed at Eli specifically was a very calculated move by the G-Man. He knew that Eli regretted his decision not to shut down the anti-mass spectrometer during the Black Mesa incident after he had heard these words once before. He knew that Eli might link this warning to the discovery of the Borealis. It would appear that the G-Man and his employers did not want the Resistance to seek this ship out. At least that is my interpretation. As expected, upon the arrival of Alyx and Gordon at White Forest, they learned of the Borealis stuck somewhere in the north, and Alyx blurted out the G-Man's message as if he had commanded her to in this moment, as the G-Man's face briefly appeared on the monitor. As expected, Eli had the reaction the G-Man wanted. As he watched, the Resistance fought off the Combine, and they even launched a rocket at a forming super portal. In doing this, the Combine was completely cut off from the planet. No backup plan. In a final moment of desperation, two Combine advisors crashed through into the hangar of a helicopter that Alyx and Gordon planned to use to rescue one of their fellow Resistance members. In this moment, Eli was brutally murdered by an advisor, and all of his memories and thoughts were absorbed by the creature before he was dropped to the ground. Murdered brutally in front of his daughter. The G-Man watched this. None of this was meant to happen. Gordon's return had ultimately led to this. Alyx would not have retrieved the information in the Citadel, and Eli would still be alive. From the G-Man's perspective, the interference of the Vortigaunt had led Gordon to be unable or unwilling to perform the tasks laid before him. As a result, actions had occurred that were unplanned. So, the G-Man and his employers looked for someone new to help them. In order to rewrite moments that had not gone to plan, the G-Man used his power and travelled back 5 years in this timeline. He foresaw how events would play out and knew how to test and hire a new recruit, a younger Alyx Vance. Just as he had with the Zen incident, the G-Man prepared a series of events to see what Alyx could do. He allowed the Combine to briefly discover his location. As quickly as they could, they used Vortessence energy to trap him inside of a prison. During a raid on a Combine facility, Dr. Eli Vance and his friend Russell entered a Combine system and discovered information about something called the Vault, but the system provided very limited details on what it actually was. As planned, Eli was captured by Combine forces, and the discovery of a Combine prison led Alyx to enter the Vault under the impression that Gordon Freeman, the hero of Black Mesa who had gone missing, was stored inside it. It was not until Alyx freed the entity that she realized he was not Gordon Freeman. He was something else.
Impressive work, Ms. Vance.
Gordon Freeman?
Gordon Freeman. Ms. Vance, you wouldn't need all that to imprison Gordon Freeman.
So, who are you?
Perhaps what I am is not as important as what I can offer you in exchange for coming all this way. Some believe the fate of our worlds is inflexible. My employers disagree. They authorize me to nudge things in a particular direction from time to time. What would you want nudged, Miss Vance?
The Combine off Earth. I want the Combine off Earth.
That would be a considerably large nudge. Too large, given the interests of my employers.
Well, you asked.
What if I could offer you something you don't know you want?
Dad? Dad? What? Is that me? What is this? What's happening?
We are in the future. This is the moment where you watch your father die. Unless...
What? Unless what?
Unless you were to take matters into your own hands. Release your father, Miss Vance. Good. As a consequence of your action, this entity will continue, and this entity will not.
Right. So he's okay, right? He lives. My dad lives.
You are aware that you've proven yourself to be of extraordinary value. A previous hire has been unable or unwilling to perform the tasks laid before him. We have struggled to find a suitable replacement until now.
No! I just want to go home. Send me home!
I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation, Miss Vance.
Wait! Hey, wait! Wait! Wait!
In allowing Alyx to reach through space and time to kill the Advisor, the G-Man had quite possibly fixed an issue created by the Vortigaunt, the death of Eli. However, Alyx had once again been plucked by the G-Man, this time as a new agent after Gordon Freeman had failed him. 5 years in the future, just after Alyx had been taken, Dr. Eli Vance knew exactly where his daughter had gone. He knew that the G-Man and his unforeseen consequences must have had something to do with her disappearance. Eli, Gordon, and Alyx were just 3 of the G-Man's pawns, a mutual friend or enemy of sorts who had ruined their lives. The G-Man had a relationship of sorts with many people. Eli knew him to be the harbinger of disaster. Breen knew him as the person who controlled Gordon. Alyx knew him as the entity that had stopped the death of her father. The Combine also knew of him in some way, and that Vortessen's energy could stop him. And the Vortigaunt also knew of him and what he could do. Other pawns included Adrian, who still remains in stasis to this day. Even Barney Calhoun was watched by the shadowy group at some point. Every aspect of the Half-Life timeline was manipulated by the G-Man and his employers for whatever goal they required. The Zen invasion triggered so much, and the placement of Gordon 20 years later allowed them to hit the Combine hard, but the interference of the Vortigaunt simply got in the way. I have done my best to pull together what I could about the G-Man and his employers, but without Half-Life 2 Episode 3 or Half-Life 3, we will sadly probably never know what they actually are or what their aim is. There are, however, several fan theories that are very interesting. The theory that the G-Man is a future Gordon Freeman is one that has floated around. G for Gordon and man at the end of Freeman. A future self guiding a younger self to make sure that something happens. Not one I buy into really. I think the most straightforward theory is that the G-Man is still a messenger of his employers, but his employers are Valve. The G-Man set up everything for the game's events to occur. When Valve struggled to create a Half-Life 2 Episode 3 that they felt would not match the hype, they made Half-Life Alyx and had the G-Man retcon one of the most impactful moments in gaming history. They rewrote the death of Eli Vance in-game, which allowed them to set up a new storyline or timeline for another game. The all-seeing Vortigaunt claimed that far distant eyes looked out through Gordon's, and that something secret steered them both, but they would not name it. We are the viewers through his eyes. The G-Man as the employee of Valve set up the entire series for us to play through. What I can't figure out though is who the Vortigaunt would be in this theory. What do you think? The most interesting theory is that the G-Man is a Shu Ulathoi, the original name of the Combine Advisor. The Breen Grub Twitter account written by Mark Laidlaw is considered not canon, but I would personally like to believe that there is some truth to it. While there are a lot to the tweets, which I have covered in a previous video, it tells the story of the Shu Ulathoi, a species of dreamers who created whole worlds inside their shared telepathic mind. These were the Shu Ulathoi in their grub stage. When they hatched, they were cut off from their worlds and transformed into whatever they wished by thought. The Shu Ulathoi were also a species conquered by the Combine, and their grubs were harvested to create the Combine Advisors. However, some of these grubs managed to escape during the invasion. The theory is that the G-Man and his employers are what these grubs turned into when they hatched. A creature with possibly psychic power that looks like a human, but something is just off. During her altercation with the G-Man, Alyx had asked who he was, and he responded with what instead. The G-Man mentions human temptations when he speaks to Adrian at the end of Opposing Force, something a non-human would say. He also said to Adrian that the Marine's ability to adapt and survive against all odds was something that reminded him of himself, something a member of a species who had survived the fall of their world would maybe say. Desperate to fight back against the Combine, who had conquered their planet, murdered their young, and created nurseries to imprint the minds of their most important members into new artificial grubs to live as one of them, the Shu Ulathoi story is fascinating, and while I could talk about it forever in this video, I would once again suggest my previous video on it. This is my favorite theory, that the G-Man was just another victim of the Combine. Viewed by all as the man with a briefcase, the G-Man still remains to be one of gaming's biggest mysteries. This entity and his employers held a considerable amount of power and used it to fulfill their goals across space and time. As for the pawns they lured into their service, their toolsets were auctioned off to the highest bidders. Corporal Adrian Shepard still remains in stasis, stuck in the very moment he was taken by the G-Man. Regardless of which theory is correct, the G-Man and his employers did appear to be at war, or at least in conflict with the Combine. The Combine were at war with anything that was not their own. I believe the Shu Ulathoi theory to be the most accurate. Even the Vortigaunt knew of them, and they also knew of the G-Man, an entity that had mimicked a human almost perfectly, but whose speech pattern and glowing green eyes gave the impression that something was off. Oddly enough, some people say I sound like the G-Man. In the G-Man and his employers' war against the Combine, who had destroyed their home and species, these hatched Shu Ulathoi may have done the same thing to others, the Nylanth, humanity, and the Vortigaunt, just so they could win. We still have so many questions. Was the G-Man against the discovery or use of the Borealis? What was he really? What did he and his employers really want? Was Adrian Shepard ever released? Was the G-Man a puppet of his employers, just like Gordon was to him? Was the G-Man suitcase his source of power? As of now, as with most of these Half-Life videos, we simply may not know the truth. However, with the retcon of Half-Life 2 Episode 2's ending during Half-Life Alyx, we can remain hopeful that Valve may actually continue this story. As of recording this, we have just had confirmation that the final Team Fortress comic has finished scripting and the artwork is being done. A comic we have waited 7 years for and accepted it would never come out. There could be hope for a continuation of this story after all. Here we explore in the lore and story behind the Combine Dropship. We all know of the collection of creatures that work together under the dominating force of the Universal Union to keep humanity in line. But at what point did each of these become a victim of the Combine, just like we did? Well before the invasion of planet Earth, there was the homeworld of the Vortigaunt, its name now unspoken by those who had survived. This species, just like humanity, were attacked. However, they escaped through to a border world and avoided the awful fate that the Combine had in store for them. Many years later, the Vortigaunt found themselves on planet Earth after the border world they had escaped to found itself in a different war, and they watched as the full might of the Combine Empire conquered Earth in a mere 7 hours. Unable to escape this time, the Vortigaunt instead joined the resistance of humanity and played their part in a war to remove the Combine from Earth. Approximately 15 years later, on a Combine-controlled Earth, a Vortigaunt called Gary created a mural in City 17. Not only was this important to tell the story of what was to come, but it also had some interesting details of what had happened in the past during the invasion of his homeworld. Now, why is this important in the history of the dropship? Well, in this invasion, the dropship can be seen deploying reinforcements as the other Combine units fire upon the Vortigaunt. This suggests that for land-based assaults, the dropship was pretty much essential, along with the gunship and strider. The lore and knowledge surrounding these creatures is pretty scarce, but there are little pieces of information sprinkled across the series, along with concept art, that can be used to generate an idea of what they were and where they came from. It is very likely that the creatures we know as the Combine dropship were once a species that lived in the oceans of a planet far away from ours. Their appearance shares a striking resemblance to the Eurypterid, a group of extinct arthropods, also referred to as sea scorpions. These went extinct on our planet approximately 251.9 million years ago. However, fossils of them have been discovered and studied. From above and below, it is clear that the dropship was inspired by this creature. It also appears that the forelimbs below were based off sea lampreys, parasitic eel-like creatures with a round, jawless mouth with sharp teeth. A large creature with a hard shell, powerful suckers, and many limbs to adapt was the perfect discovery for the Combine after they arrived on the planet of this ocean-dwelling creature, and just like they had done to many species before, they captured them and began their experimentation. This species would become one of the most important units in future invasions. The Combine just had to perfect them. The Combine had attacked and enslaved countless species across the multiverse, and they had the perfect role in mind for this creature: a support unit. Although originally a native ocean species, the Combine implanted 4 engines into the creature's top and bottom back appendages. This transformed them into flying synthetics, a combination of flesh and machine. This aspect was essential in the plan that the Combine had for them. Of course, with every species dominated by the Combine, they were indoctrinated as they were mutilated, and it is likely that as time went on, the Universal Union bred them into this line of servitude, unaware of what their ancestors once were or where they had come from. With these powerful pulse engines, the species could fly, and to navigate, what appeared to be metal wings were installed into the creature's 2 front arms, each wing itself emblazoned with the Combine logo. This creature was very much alive, but to its ruler, it was just another piece of equipment. Designated the name of the dropship by the resistance of humanity, it was noted to fly across the wasteland. The name dropship came from its primary function. Its 4-arm-like appendages with powerful suckers were used to carry materials deemed important by the Combine. This normally came in the form of a container used to move the passengers inside from one location to another. During the invasions of countless planets, the dropship was essential in bringing in additional reinforcements to keep the Combine's assault strong. Around 15 years after the assault on planet Earth, it was noted that the containers the creatures carried were slightly smaller than the ones used a mere 5 years later. This could suggest that during this period, the Combine had increased the capacity for soldiers inside in order to keep up with the rise in resistance activity. Not only did their ability to carry these containers make them perfect for this support role, but their hard carapace also protected them for the most part from their opponent's strikes. They could not attack themselves, however, the containers they regularly carried were fitted with a pulse cannon manned by the soldiers within. The underbelly of the dropship was its weakest point, yet the containers they carried often protected them from attacks from below. After the assault on planet Earth, the Combine constructed a giant citadel within City 17. This level of construction would have taken a long time even for the Combine to construct, but with many creatures with different skill sets at their disposal, it was noted that the dropship was used to carry materials up to the higher levels of this structure. It had multiple uses, and while not violent itself, the dropship's arrival during the uprising often pushed the resistance back due to the soldiers it carried. In order to prepare for the threat that the dropships brought, the resistance instead attempted to take down the dropship before the soldiers inside could be deployed. To do this, they discovered that although their shells were tough, 4 solid hits from a rocket-propelled grenade was enough to kill its cargo. This task itself was difficult as the dropships often moved around a lot. Alongside its ability to strengthen the forces of the Combine, the dropship was noted to steal important resistance equipment, one of which was the scout car that Dr. Gordon Freeman drove to traverse the wasteland. At this point, the dropship only did what they were ordered to do from birth, attacked for simply existing, an extremely valuable resource in a war they did not want, unaware that they were once a free species. The Half-Life universe is full of terrifying stories of what could happen if another species out there discovered not only the knowledge of teleportation across dimensions and universes, but if they also possessed the desire to conquer all. The dropship, or whatever they once were likely just like us, happy on our own planet, until their discovery by the Combine, and their lives were turned into a constant, living nightmare as they were transformed into living weapons and tools. The fascination with the dropship is interesting. Unnatural flying machines tasked to keep the Combine fully prepared and restocked with units, creatures that were enslaved, bred and transformed into cogs in the ever-growing Combine machine. Just like the dropship was able to help conquer new planets, would it be that much of a stretch to suggest that maybe humanity were too? Their legacy lives on as yet another creature corrupted by the mighty Combine Empire, just another species that will continue to play their important role in the next war. Here, we explore the lore and story behind the Combine Empire in Half-Life. Now, where do we begin? Well, at the beginning. Very little is known about the origin of what we, humanity, now call the Combine. They would likely have begun just like we did, a species who grew intelligent on their homeworld. They would have looked out to the stars and, as they grew and evolved, learned as much as they could about the world and universe. At one point, their technology became incredibly complex, in which they mastered dark energy and used it as a power source. This early race of the Combine was not a peaceful species, and they had one goal in mind: to conquer all life. It could be theorized that on their world, they would have also experimented with and biologically adapted the lesser life forms around them to serve a purpose in their goal, to become soldiers or tools in an army. As their scientists used their dark energy power technology to create weapons, structures, and tools, these armies would have likely left their world to conquer other worlds in local space to bring back resources and new species to adapt. All of this is only theorized as the Combine were not forthcoming with information to humanity, but what is known is that one of their biggest technological advancements came when they discovered how to generate portals to tunnel through into alternate universes, realities, and dimensions. The name the Aleph universe was used at one point in Half-Life 2 beta. This could have been the name of the Combine's home universe or overworld. Whether these are different or one and the same is also unknown. The name has also not been confirmed to be canon. Powered by a dark fusion reactor, Combine armies were sent through into these new places to conquer and assimilate the life they found. As the Combine broke through into incredible new dimensions, realities, and universes, they discovered ancient satellites colonized by sentient fungi, gas giants inhabited by vast meteorological intelligences, worlds stretched thin across the membranes where dimensions intersected. But in all of this wonder, all they brought with them was pain, chaos, and death. The original species of the Combine, and with it, the race at the top of their structure, is unknown. But as time passed and they conquered worlds, they continued to learn and grow. They overwhelmed each world they encountered, destroyed the strongest of their forces, and they began their process. They forced the intelligent life to submit and comply, set up bases to govern them from citadels powered by dark energy, explored the world for natural resources to send to their overworld, learned their technology, and experimented with anything they found of use, both in biology and technology. During which, the Combine encountered the species that were once the Strider, Gunship, Dropship, Hunter, and more. These became units in their armies to conquer more worlds, but they had once been creatures with their own worlds, biologically mutilated and augmented into tools, workers, and soldiers. Striders and gunships became essential in their invasions as they took out armies with ease from afar. Dropships brought in reinforcements when needed, and hunters brutally attacked and massacred whatever they were ordered to kill on the front lines. As humans, we call them the Combine for 3 reasons. It is a term they accept, they are a combination of the species they had enslaved and crafted into their forces, and finally, they harvested what they found into something perfect, in their eyes, to fulfill their goal. To explore just how cruel and barbaric the creation of these synthetic creatures were, the gunship is a perfect example. It looks like they were once water-based creatures similar to the whales of Earth. During the Combine's experimentation of what they could be in their army, they brought them out of the water and transformed them into armored aircrafts with a rotor installed into their flesh and skin. To assault the targets of the Combine, a heavy pulse cannon and warp cannon were also crafted onto them. They were turned into living weapons. These were just one of many of the Combine's attempts at forced evolution. On Earth, we likely only saw a fraction of the monstrosities the Combine created. For some time, the Combine conquered, plundered, and assimilated worlds across the multiverse. Before the species discovered what had discovered them, it was too late. They were smarter and stronger. The Combine only grew stronger upon each successful conquest as they acquired more resources for their overworld, more technology and insight into the universe that the species had uncovered, and new units and mindless drones for their cause. There were, however, some who just barely survived the horrors of the Combine. This multi-dimensional alien empire had destroyed worlds on their goal for ultimate power and control. With their armies of synths, on one of their conquests, they discovered the homeworld of the Nylanth species. In a genocide that killed countless, only one escaped, but not before they could experiment on it. Scars and surgical lines filled its body, and it floated thanks to what looked like a levitation device installed on its bottom half. Brutal. To escape, the creature was lucky enough to discover a connection to a border world between dimensions, Zen. This place moved between universes, connected to them, allowed light to move over, and then moved on to the next. It also meant that when the Combine attempted to track down this survivor, they could not. The Combine also assaulted the world of the Vortigaunt, in which some of them also escaped to Xen. The Vortigaunt were a pretty big loss for the Combine, as this species had the ability to commune with a source known as the Vortessence. This gave them the ability to communicate with each other through it, generate energy, and for some, explore future versions of timelines. If the Combine were able to capture them, these would essentially work as living batteries, but for now, they were lost to Xen. The Combine did not like to lose, and as they ventured across the multiverse on their quest, they also sought out those who had evaded them. The structure of the Empire is not known currently, but it is believed that the Combine Advisor may be at the top, the planners and commanders. As with most lore in this universe, a lot of information is missing. There is, however, a great idea of where the Combine Advisor came from and what their ultimate use was. Greengrub is a Twitter account run by Mark Laidlaw, the writer behind the story we know of the Half-Life series. Now, this Twitter account and these tweets are not considered to be canon, but they do offer an interesting perspective of what the Combine Advisor once were and how they were used in the Combine Empire. It tells the story of the Shu Ulathoi, a name that the Vortigaunt called the Combine Advisors canonically. As it goes, the Shu Ulathoi were a species of dreamers. Their world existed within a globular cluster and was home to extreme erratic seasons with lethal properties. Because of this, in their larval stage, they were buried in the ground and their physical bodies lay dormant for extended periods of time. Yet, it was in this dormant form that they thrived. They had a natural racial telepathy and they created a psychic, dreamer's world with philosophers, scientists, sages, and composers of intricate art forms that existed only within their minds, an invisible culture that persisted for aeons. When the Shu Ulathoi were ready to hatch, their psychic strength was so strong that they could imprint upon their cells and dictate their new form. Again, this has not been confirmed to be canon, but the interesting part is what happened when the Combine of this story discovered these larval Shu Ulathoi. Upon the invasion of the species, the Combine could not penetrate the Shu Ulathoi physically, so they used their technologies to weaponize their thoughts and introduce them into the psychic dreamer's world. In doing so, the world corrupted, but the Shu Ulathoi had no idea how their world had fallen. When they awoke, they discovered the Combine. Just a lucky few took flight to freedom and escaped, but the majority were taken. Having been discovered and understood the process of parasitic engineering within the minds of the Shu Ulathoi, they adapted it and developed a way to imprint a conscious mind of their choosing on the exhumed bodies of the Shu Ulathoi, and later, those synthetically created in Combine nurseries. Now, why is this important to the Combine's story? Well, it is stated that when the Combine conquered worlds and captured the intelligent civilizations on them, they were able to copy the minds of the best and brightest. With these, they imprinted them in grubs to be of use. In their engineering of these creatures, they also utilized their psychic ability to fly and severely injure anything around them. In their assault of worlds, these Combine Advisors, advisor being a great way to describe a bright mind stolen from those they had conquered, were essential in the planning and high-level function of the Combine's empire while the biological weapons did their bidding. I would also speculate that the Combine maybe imprinted the mind of their original species onto these advisors in a way to be stronger, a part of a psychic network with every advisor, and most importantly, to, in a sense, become immortal. Maybe they understood they had outgrown their original form. This is just a theory. Greengrub is not considered canon, but the lore in these tweets perfectly matches up with what we know about the advisors, and the fact that Mark Laidlaw wrote them was just too important not to mention. There is a lot more to the Bring Rub tweets, but I have highlighted the most important points that relate to the Combine. I do have a full video on it in the description. As of now, the Combine Advisor is the highest ranking Combine unit in their army that we know of. But then again, as a human, we have only seen what they have allowed us to see. Outside of the madness and terror that was the Combine invasion of the multiverse, in our universe, humanity sought to understand and hopefully one day explore the space around us. There were several companies working with that goal in mind, to understand, observe, and explore. Of note, Aperture Science and the Black Mesa Research Corporation were two of the strongest, and they began a long-standing rivalry. Over in the New Mexico desert, the Black Mesa Research Facility explored various fields of scientific endeavors. One of these was teleportation technology. Over their time, they had managed to develop a way to teleport from one location of Black Mesa to another, primarily in the Lambda Research Core, something that even the Combine had not mastered. While the Union could tunnel into new universes, they could not teleport from one region to another within them. This was a technology they sought after. In another experiment, the Black Mesa team did something impressive. They opened up a connection not into their world, but a border world, Zen. They had created a cross-dimensional portal. This was an incredibly important moment in human history, a moment that only few would ever know of. Over some time, Black Mesa sent through survey teams to explore Zen. They learned that this was a border world between dimensions and that all life here had come from countless worlds and merged into a thriving yet dangerous ecosystem. This exploration of Zen was incredible for our kind. However, it led to something disastrous. A resonance cascade after an experiment went horribly wrong. This event pulled through the creatures of Zen to Earth. This also alerted the Combine of humanity's existence. Just like they had done to countless species and worlds before, they prepared for and sent through an invasion as they used their portal technology to tunnel into our universe. When they were ready, they began a mass genocide across the globe. In just 7 hours, Dr. Wallace Breen, on behalf of the United Nations, offered our submission in return for our lives and servitude to what the newspapers called the Combine, a name they appeared to accept from us. While this was a regular conquest for the extra-dimensional alien empire, this was the beginning of something completely new for humanity. This was their introduction to alien life, and it was the worst case they could have hoped for. This was a completely new age and era for humanity. This universal union saw something in this species, and having agreed to peace of sorts, as long as they were in control, the Combine appointed Dr. Wallace Breen as Earth's administrator, the human in charge of keeping his kind in line. To do this, he was given direct contact with the Combine advisors. In essence, he did what they ordered. He did not have any control in their eyes. He was just someone who did what they ordered. His world had fallen so far. His kind had lost millions or even billions of their own, but Wallace saw promise in what the Combine was and what they could offer. He saw them as humanity's benefactors, a way to jump ahead in knowledge and evolution. To control their newly acquired species, the Combine had what remained of the human population transported like cattle into settlements that they controlled completely, one of which was labelled City 17 in Eastern Europe. In the centre, a power core was teleported into the city, and around it, they began the construction of a citadel. a structure almost identical to many found on the Combine overworlds. What remained of the rest of the planet is unknown. The Combine did their best to reduce any knowledge that our kind had of their actions or structure, but from the research of Dr. Isaac Kleiner, he believed that every settlement across the globe had a citadel. From these, the Combine governed the population below, constructed units and reinforcements, communicated with and traveled between Earth and the Combine overworld, and finally, offered a place for Wallace Breen to stay as he was relocated across the wasteland of Earth to do his job. With humanity sealed within their city-sized prisons, the Combine made their changes to the planet itself. To introduce themselves properly and keep order through Breen, the Combine relied mostly on fear and paranoia, but they also put their mark on the regions accessible to humanity. As the Combine, they wanted us to unite with and work with them for their goals. They branded the creatures they created. On posters, propaganda, and generally, Combine imagery in the cities and Combine facilities, they placed the claw logo, a sharp claw with clear edges similar to that of the Combine's aggressive architecture. In the center, a circle. This likely represented Earth or the other planets they conquered. They were larger, stronger, and were able to hold these worlds in their grasp. What is interesting about several of these is that they placed a white dove above this logo. Historically, in human culture, it was a symbol of hope, honesty, purity, and peace. Absolutely something they were not. Still, it was interesting to see that they explored human culture and adapted it into their messaging and psychological warfare. For those under the control of the Combine, they may have even been given the opportunity to learn their alphabet. Wherever humanity went, the Combine was there in some form. We were not there to experience what the Combine did to the homeworld of the gunship, dropship, advisor, or hunter, so we cannot compare just how awful their experience was. However, on Earth, there was suffering and great change. To fuel their war machine, the Combine made changes to Earth. They made use of a giant teleporter that essentially acted as a drain in the ocean. This drain transported the water to other Combine territories across the multiverse. Across the wasteland of the planet, ships dropped to the seabed, and what remained of the oceans became infested by leeches that ate all water life they encountered, as well as any biological life that entered the water. In the Combine's adaptation of the planet, they did come across one major issue. Not the humans, but what had come from Zen during the portal storms after the Resonance Cascade. Headcrabs, barnacles, ichthyosaur, antlion, and other hostile life took control of the territories outside of the Combine-controlled settlements. Of note, the antlion were very aggressive. As for the rest of the animals who had once lived in these regions, they were wiped out. From Zen also came the Vortigaunt, who had hidden away from the Combine for so long, but the Resonance Cascade had brought them back into the Combine's sights. With the planet under their control and a new source of natural resources, the Combine looked at what they could do to the human and Vortigaunt population. How could they adapt them and make them useful in their army and workforce? Nova Prospect was once a human prison. The Combine kept the structure's original purpose to hold those who disobeyed their orders. They also chose it as one of the locations they used to transform the human population into something useful. This was seen as a place of nightmares to the human and Vortigaunt. We will get into that a little later. Within the settlements, the humans believed that their new leaders put something in the water to make them forget. While not confirmed completely, it would make sense. If the Combine could confuse and manipulate the minds of humanity to make them forget and disorient them, maybe they would forget why they hated their rulers so much. On top of this, the Combine also activated a global suppression field. In essence, it prevented certain protein chains important to the creation of life from forming. This was just one aspect of how powerful and intelligent the Combine were. Due to this, there would be no new human life, only what our benefactors allowed us to keep from what already existed. Of course, in such awful and anxiety-ridden living conditions, there were some who became Combine collaborators. They reported their neighbors' activities in return for additional rations and standing with the Empire. This was an issue for a small resistance that had begun to form. It was smart on the side of the Combine, as this fostered a society of fear and paranoia ruled by the human Combine police force. Big Brother was always watching. But what did the human arm of the Overwatch consist of? Under Dr. Wallace Breen's guidance of his planet, the human arm of the Combine's army were given instructions through the Overwatch. These human units came in different forms based on how they were adapted, and each one was important in the control of the wider human population. For the humans who wanted to work with the Combine or explore the benefits of cooperation, they took the first step to become a part of the Civil Protection, the Combine's human police force. These were still human with no to little changes to them. They were given additional rations and better accommodation in return for their service of patrolling the streets, raiding the homes of those they suspected of being a member of the Resistance, and generally keeping the population in line. If they decided to submit further to the Combine's goal, they were given the opportunity to go through forced evolution. Our kind began around 3,975 million years ago. We evolved through countless forms before giving rise to the Hominidae family. These were primates such as chimpanzees, orangutans, and gorillas. That was around 25 million years ago. From there, it took the tens of millions of years for the Homo sapiens sapiens, modern humans, those being us, to emerge. But in just a matter of hours to years, some of us evolved further into the Homo sapiens combinus, a transformation made possible by the knowledge and biological enhancements gifted to us by our benefactors. This change came in the form of the Overwatch soldier. Dubbed transhuman or post-human by some, these units were enhanced with cybernetics, purged of their emotions, accepted memory replacement, conditioned to obey their leaders, and granted knowledge of battle tactics. These units were deployed both on Earth and other Combine territories across the universes. In numbers, they had the ability to wipe out almost anything in their path, a very valuable acquisition for our leaders. As for their role on Earth, they were stationed to monitor and protect important Combine strongholds within and outside of the cities. As of now, we know only a few, those being the Overwatch Nexus, the Citadel of City 17, and Nova Prospect. For the most loyal, tactile, and strongest soldiers, they were offered additional biological upgrades and augmentations. These Overwatch elite units were then stationed as the leaders of Overwatch squads and were found predominantly within the Citadel. Within other regions of City 17, specifically the Quarantine Zone, an area of the city sealed off completely, infested by Xenian flora and fauna, the Overwatch Commando Special Forces team were found. These consisted of the Combine Grunts. These were just slightly above the Civil Protection rank. The Combine Ordinal commanded the Grunts. The Combine Charger were designated to focus on tougher battles in which they were trained to use a large shield. And finally, the Combine Suppressor were typically brought in to help the Grunts, Ordinals, and Charger through heavy fire. These were rarely seen by anyone outside of the Quarantine Zone, and thus, even some Resistance members did not know they even existed. Just as they had done to countless species before, the Combine had improved what they had come across to be useful in their army. As for the rest of humanity, they simply lived in fear and paranoia as Combine propaganda was thrown at them from everywhere. This mostly came in the form of posters in the eyes of their neighbours who could not be trusted, and also from Breencasts. These messages directly from Wallace Breen reminded them that they did not need any control, that the Combine offered their species knowledge and advancement in something greater, and that it was a gift. Still, for those who rebelled or joined the Resistance, they were granted a different fate: to become a stalker. This process was brutal. It was a fate worse than death. Within Nova Prospekt, these unwilling anti-citizens were adapted into a form that was useful for the Combine, instead of the issues they would have caused as a human. Their bodies were stripped of everything they did not need to function, and their thoughts were conditioned to perform tasks. They became mindless drones, simply cogs in the Combine machine. The Combine had perfectly fostered a society of fear, desperation, and hopelessness, all from practicing on other worlds, in which other alien societies may have also been in a very similar situation to the humans of Earth. While they had perfected and explored the psychology and biological means of what it meant to be human, Earth also had something else to offer them: our technology. To improve their union, our benefactors looked to the technology we had developed over our time on this planet. They saw our trains and cannibalized them into razor trains. These were used to transport technology, combat units, stalkers, advisor pods, and various other important cargo across the whole wasteland. Not only was this a fast way to travel across a Combine-controlled Earth, but it was also one of the safest, as the wasteland was riddled with Xenian flora and fauna. These creatures did not care about the war between humanity, Vortigauns, and Combine. They just wanted to live and protect their territories. Restrictors were installed within sandy regions to push away any potential antlion nest that could form. These pounded the ground aggressively and overwhelmed the creature's ability to detect vibrations to navigate. This also helped the Combine unit sent in to capture the antlion for experimentation, to harvest their larvae for their healing qualities, and to milk them of an extract that appeared to naturally harm Xen's plant life, something that was desperately needed to reduce the dangers of the quarantine zone. Our military vehicles were adapted into the Armored Personnel Carrier, and a Ka-27 chopper was adapted into the Hunter chopper. Both of these vehicles became essential in the transportation of Combine units and in combat scenarios. Within the human settlements, the Combine created city scanners that were dispatched by civil protection units and higher. These flew around, surveyed the area, and took pictures of the citizens to make sure that everyone was where they were supposed to be. Manhacks were also dispatched by these units. These flying shredders cut up what they were told to target. Sentry turrets were programmed to protect important regions. Roller mines tracked down and sent out waves of electricity, and hopper mines, based on our human landmines, destroyed anything that came near them. Our human technology was just that, human. In the hands of the Combine, they took it, improved it, and used it against us in these new forms. If we are going to look at every Combine piece of technology, it is also important to talk about the Vault. This was essentially a giant prison brought in to capture and hold the G-Man, one of the stronger enemies of the Combine. This entity is still shrouded in mystery, and little was able to stop him or his employers from interfering in Combine plans. There was, however, one thing our benefactors knew was powerful: vortessence energy. To the look of the Combine, upon their acquisition of Earth, they had rediscovered the Vortigauns who had fled them. With this species, they trapped them in containers and siphoned their vortessence as living batteries. This powered the Vault. The Combine's technology came in different forms. There was a lot of it, and it was needed in their ultimate goal to dominate all life in the multiverse. Yet, Earth had a piece of technology they wanted, but it was hidden behind the might of a resistance. The years of Combine occupation were difficult for the population of Earth. So much had been taken from them, but they were a part of something greater now. As Dr. Wallace Breen put it, for the first time ever, as a species, immortality was in our reach. This required radical rethinking and a revision of our genetic imperatives. Instinct coddled us and kept us safe in those hard Scrabble years when we hardened our sticks and cooked our first meals above a meager fire and stared at the shadows that leapt upon the cavern's walls. Our benefactors took these instincts away from us. Our ability to reproduce, think, and interact with the world were holding us back. Our instinct of what we saw as a threat was actually an opportunity. We should thank the Combine for removing our natural urges, to embrace their views and master ourselves as a species. Yet, there were many who did not agree with this sentiment. The Resistance. This group of outlaws worked in secret under the leadership of Dr. Alyx Vance, Dr. Isaac Kleiner, and Dr. Arnie Magnusson, all previous employees of the Black Mesa Research Facility. Their hard years of work did pay off. They set up strong bases, an underground railroad that allowed citizens of City 17 to escape. They raided Combine bases for technology, and most importantly, they developed their own. Specifically within Kleiner's lab in the heart of City 17 and in Black Mesa East in the canals, they used their Black Mesa knowledge to create a teleporter. With all of the technology in the world, this would seem like a natural progression. However, this was something the Combine had not figured out. They had only been able to tunnel between universes on their goal to conquer all life. They had been unable to find a way to teleport from one location to another within a single universe. Years of fighting and growth allowed the Resistance more knowledge of their enemy, but with a human in control of all the other humans, the previous administrator of Black Mesa specifically, he had no idea how to strengthen his position and importance to the Combine. At one point, Dr. Judith Mossman became a member of the Resistance as a double agent. She was stationed within Black Mesa East and helped Eli with the development of his teleporter. With this knowledge, she began to construct one for the Combine in Nova Prospect. Based on the theory of teleportation technology back at Black Mesa, the Resistance used Zen as a dimensional slingshot to swing around the border world to another location in their dimension. Breen was desperate to understand how this technology actually worked. He wanted to provide this knowledge for the Combine, but the Resistance had not completely figured it out themselves. If the Combine could teleport across a single universe, their goal would be so much easier. Still, outside of their attempts to attain the teleportation technology, the Combine also had to deal with Resistance attacks and raids of their facility. They did, however, have significant victories that severely wounded the attempts of the group, one of which was Ravenholm. This town had once been home to a large Resistance community. Upon their discovery of this place, the Combine used an interesting tactic to take them out. The headcrabs of Zen had been an issue for the humanoid units in their ranks, but the Combine had not only experimented with and adapted some of these, but they had also utilized them into biological weapons. In what they called headcrab shells, they loaded up these little balls of flesh tightly and launched them into Resistance locations. They did not have to enter these territories themselves. The headcrabs and the zombies that came from them were dangerous enough. Around 20 years after the Combine's invasion, the Resistance perfected their localized teleportation technology. It was also on this day that Gordon Freeman appeared. He was a survivor of Black Mesa who had just disappeared. As quickly as he arrived, he gave the Resistance the push they needed to begin an uprising. The perfect collaboration between the Resistance, Gordon Freeman, the Vortigaunt, and even in the background, the G-Man who steered Gordon was enough to dismantle a lot of the control our benefactors had attained over the past 2 decades. Nova Prospekt exploded, the Citadel in City 17 and all of those across the planet fell after the dark fusion reactor became unstable. Because of this, the Combine's connection to the overworld was severed. In a last-ditch effort to open up a connection, the Combine units on Earth attempted to use the energy from the collapse of the Citadel to open a super portal, but the plan failed when the Resistance launched a rocket with a satellite array. 20 years worth of control was wiped out in a matter of days by the return of Gordon Freeman, his traversal of the wasteland, and a strong Resistance community. In the last known Combine action to occur in this universe, 2 advisors broke into the hangar of White Forest as Gordon Freeman and Alyx Vance planned to travel to the north to explore the reports of a missing research vessel, the Borealis, a ship with technology on board that could aid the Resistance or the Combine, depending on who tracked it down first. In this moment, many things happened. An advisor pinned Alyx and Gordon to a wall as the other plunged its tongue into the back of Eli's head. Not only did this kill him, but it also allowed the advisor to absorb parts of Eli's memories and knowledge of the Resistance. They may have been cut off from their overworld, but they could still fight and regain control somehow. To the look of Alyx and Gordon, a Resistance unit, Dog, jumped from the roof and attacked the advisors. However, one escaped. In an adjusted timeline, Eli survived this encounter, but Alyx disappeared. Her father knew that the G-Man must have had something to do with it, and in these final moments of the timeline, 2 things were for sure. The Resistance had to find Alyx, and they also had to reach the Borealis first. The fate of their species depended on it. While the collapse of the Citadel, destruction of City 17, discovery of the existence of the Borealis, and generally, the loss of the connection to Earth was how Half-Life 2 Episode 2 put an end to the series for now, there was another piece of media released by our favourite Mark Laidlaw. Again, this is not considered canon. However, considering that there was a planned Half-Life 2 Episode 3 that was never released, when Mark posted Epistle 3 on his blog, fans could not help but notice the parallels between the characters' names, events, and plot points. Epistle 3 has been taken down from Mark's blog, but it is still accessible somewhere. This is not considered canon, but it did give an interesting perspective from an ex-writer of where the series could have concluded. I will not go through the whole story. I have a whole video for that linked below. Towards the end of the story, Gordon Freeman and Alyx Vance discover the Borealis and discover that it has the ability to teleport through time and space. They decided that this technology was too powerful for the Resistance and the Combine to get their hands on, so they turned it into a time-traveling missile. The events are quick, but Judith is shot by Alyx, Alyx is taken away by the G-Man, and Gordon is left alone on the ship as it teleports into the Combine's overworld. The most important part of this story is this. Gordon sees just how vast the Empire was. They had managed to construct just a part of their empire around a star. They had created a Dyson sphere, a megastructure that encompassed a star and used the energy from it to power the structure. Even though the Borealis was powerful, Gordon ultimately knew that even when it hit the sphere at this speed, it would not even be registered by the Combine. Their empire and power was much larger than he had anticipated. This Dyson sphere was just a peak of their home universe. What did they have in others? To Gordon's luck, he was teleported out of the Borealis before it hit the sphere by a group of Vortigaunt, but he was left with the image he had seen. The Combine truly were an impossible force to defeat. Epistle 3 is a fantastic read, and it has split the community on whether it should be considered canon or not. Personally, it adds a little closure but not complete closure. I wanted to just at least mention Epistle 3 in this video because of how it described the Combine and their overworld. The power to construct a Dyson sphere. That feeling of loss and helplessness Gordon would have felt in that moment is immense. Even now, what we know of the mighty Combine Empire is limited. Sure, in this video, I have explored how they conquered worlds, transported the natural materials to other territories, adapted technology, and biologically adapted the creatures into something that better suited the Combine's needs. Yet, in the grand scheme of things, we only saw a glimpse of the Combine overworld in that brief moment at the top of City 17's Citadel before the collapse. We know that the Combine located on Earth were desperate to stop the Resistance during Half-Life 2 Episode 2. Although Gordon's actions led to the fall of the Citadel, it was the Combine who hoped to use the energy to send a transmission to the overworld in order to generate a super portal. They sent waves of their units to White Forest in order to stop the launch of the rockets that would close the portal as it formed. This was all we saw from Earth. If Epistle 3 was accurate in the fact that the Combine had constructed part of their civilization on a Dyson sphere, I have no idea how humanity would have stopped them. From the desperation we saw in Episode 2, we know that the Combine are scrambling and desperate. As of now, in the current state, the Combine are cut off from Earth. The Earth-based units were in a state of attempting to regroup, and the Borealis was the next stage in their plan, whatever that was. In this video, we explore the life, lore and story of Alyx Vance. Even at the young age of 3 or 4, Alyx Vance did not have a standard childhood. Her father was Dr. Alyx Vance, a renowned scientist. As a result of his academic and theoretical accomplishments, he had managed to secure a position at the top secret Black Mesa research facility as a member of the anomalous materials team in Sector C. The work performed at this facility was heavily classified, and to keep it out of the hands of the many competitors across the globe, the personnel were required to live on site in the dormitories provided by the Research Corporation. Their motto was, working to make a better tomorrow for all mankind, a mission statement that, looking back, has failed completely. As for Alyx's mother and wife of Eli, Alyx Vance, it is unknown what her role was at the facility. She could have been a scientist or another bright member of the personnel, yet any information about her is known only to the few survivors of what was to come.
Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
Shut it down! Shutting down! Someone get him out of there! It's not shutting down! Move down! Four. Breathe! My God, what have we done?
On May 16th of a year in the early 2000s, an experiment went terribly wrong and brought waves of hostile, extraterrestrial creatures from a different world into the facility. In this chaos, the majority of the personnel fell to the headcrabs, Vortigaunt and Bullsquid of Zen. As Eli attempted to make his way back to his wife and daughter to secure their safety, Alyx sat there, unable to defend herself from the horrors that had occurred. It was during this moment that he appeared, an agent of the chaos that had unfolded. The G-Man approached Alyx and observed her as a mere child. She was of no practical use to anyone. However, he did see that she could be of use in the future. Against the orders of his employers, the entity plucked Alyx out of Black Mesa and saved her from a similar fate to her mother. Eli had been warned before this experiment had taken place to prepare for unforeseen consequences by the very man that had saved his daughter. And before he made his own bid for survival, Eli grabbed a photograph of his family, Black Mesa keepsakes, and a jewel that his late wife had owned. At least Alyx would have a way to remember her mother as she grew up. Even after the resonance cascade had been stopped through the sacrifice of the legendary hero, Gordon Freeman, the few survivors of the Black Mesa incident would not find safety outside the facility. They would find only chaos. Scientists remain unable to offer any solution to the ongoing portal storms that have devastated cities worldwide, nor are they any closer to determining how to predict when new portals will appear. The portal creatures and the Combine appear to be adversaries. Our planet may be little more than a battleground for two enemy species. We have submitted to our alien invaders. If we want to survive, I guess we have to follow their rules now. With full control of the majority of humanity, the Combine moved the population across countries and continents into settlements to monitor and control them. However, for the survivors of Black Mesa, they had other plans. After their relocation to Eastern Europe, Eli took his daughter away from one of these settlements, City 17, and created a new home in an abandoned power generation plant in the canals. A place that Eli could not only raise Alyx in safety, but also where he could set up a lab and work with other survivors to fight back against the Combine. In these early days, only Alyx and Eli lived in the resistance base of Black Mesa East, but as the weeks and months passed, the more rebellious of humanity arrived and joined the fight. Despite a considerable loss at such a young age, Alyx had such a positive attitude. Her childhood had been ripped from her. The Combine had cut off the internet. Their changes and the Xenian arrival on the planet had resulted in the extinction of countless species, and any hope to explore outside was filled with danger. She would not hear the music of Mozart, understand floppy disks, or even master the art of the creation of a club sandwich, as turkeys and pigs had become extinct. Instead, Alyx was raised by strong members of a growing resistance. Eli acted as her blueprint and moral compass to navigate a cruel, dangerous world. Her uncle Kleiner communicated with her from his resistance base in the heart of City 17, and Barney Calhoun, once a security guard, attempted to keep her and her father safe with information he could attain as a double spy in the human arm of the Combine's police force. While the children of Earth had once grown up with playgrounds and toys, Alyx grew up with a scrapyard filled with metals, technology, and stolen Combine equipment from Combine raids led by her father. If they could understand the Combine and their technology, they could evenly match them in battle. To protect his daughter and offer her companionship for when he was away on these raids, Eli also designed and constructed Dog. This robot was incredibly advanced. He was sentient, had the ability to locate Alyx wherever she was, a sixth sense of sorts, and above anything, was extremely protective of her. While Dog's first mark was fairly small, over the years, Eli taught Alyx everything he knew about robotics and how the technology of Black Mesa East worked, as they made him bigger, faster, and stronger. Dog became a part of the Vance family and friend to Alyx. Black Mesa East was full of resistance members with different backgrounds and skills, and it showed. Alyx learned how to hack both human and Combine technology, how to defend herself with and without weaponry, and most importantly, how to read people and predict their actions. Alyx Vance had had her childhood ripped away from her, but as a result of her upbringing as the daughter of the leader of a resistance, she had grown into one of the smartest and well-trained recruits. Black Mesa East had been her home and sanctuary away from the horrors of the world, a world she had been raised to survive. By the age of 19, Alyx had begun to take on assignments for the Resistance. Having helped her father build up a scout car, Alyx frequently ventured outside the safety of Black Mesa East and explored the sandy coast of the Wasteland. These regions were dangerous and had become home to several of the Xenian creatures that had been pulled through to Earth during the portal storms. Alyx, however, was aware of these dangers. She knew these regions and defended herself when required on her way to the Resistance bases out there. As an adult, Alyx also performed recon missions within the heart of City 17. She knew how to blend in and how to gather the intelligence the Resistance needed. For this, she even set up her own apartment, just close enough to the action and just far enough away not to be detected. From this apartment terrace, Alyx Vance listened to radio reports and watched as the Combine constructed their citadel. From her cozy room of operation, she recorded Combine activity both through notes and through video footage. She was also not alone here. She had adopted a snark. With a television to review the footage she had captured, Alyx would spend long days here as she played her part in the acquisition of any information she could find, and theorized how these new Combine developments worked and how they would impact the planet. Close by, the Resistance had eyes and ears everywhere, and they also reported their findings to Alyx to relay to her father and Dr. Kleiner. Having also perfected the route between Black Mesa East and City 17, Alyx also visited Dr. Kleiner and brought with her materials and plans that could be of use to the Resistance. She also kept him company. The Combine had taken so much from humanity over the past 15 years, and many knew that a resistance existed. They just had to seek it out. To get these new members from City 17 to Black Mesa East, Alyx helped them flee the city on foot through the Underground Railroad, yet this route was not entirely safe as the dangers of the Wasteland, and even a chance the Combine could spot their attempts to escape meant that not everyone made it to their final destination. Dr. Kleiner and Dr. Vance realized that they had to find another way to travel between City 17 and Black Mesa East, a solution that lay in the research they had conducted way back at Black Mesa. Always eager to help out, Alyx aided her father in Black Mesa East in the development of a teleporter that could link to another one in Kleiner's lab. They believed that if they could utilize the same relay on the border world of Xen that Black Mesa had used to travel there, they could use Xen as an unexpressed axis. Essentially, they could use the border world as a dimensional slingshot to return to another specified location on Earth. This idea was great in theory, but they struggled to make it a reality. On their pathway to perfect this, another scientist became a part of the Resistance team, Dr. Judith Mossman. This new addition was different. Alyx had a gut instinct that Judith could not be trusted. On top of this, Mossman questioned almost anything Alyx did and appeared to have an interest in her father. To keep the peace, Alyx spent most of her time outside and on assignments away from Mossman. Alyx barely remembered her childhood, the incident that had taken her mother away from her, or even her rescue at the hands of the G-Man. Yet she knew what her mother looked like, wore a Black Mesa shirt, and wore her mother's jewel around her neck. She also knew of Gordon Freeman, the man who had disappeared during the Resonance Cascade, a man who would change everything. After several failed attempts to create a functioning teleporter, Alyx traveled from Black Mesa East with a part that the team believed would perfect it. This was a red letter day, just not for the reason they believed it would be. As Alyx installed this part into the teleporter, Dr. Kleiner received a call from Barney Calhoun, undercover at the City 17 train station.
Great Scott! Gordon Freeman! I expected more warning.
Yeah, you and me both, Doc. He was about to board the express to Nova Prospect.
Well, Barney, what do you intend?
I'm thinking.
This was interesting. Although she could not hear Gordon on the call, Alyx knew how important he was. Maybe his actions were worth more than words. To get Freeman to his lab, Kleiner asked that Alyx go out into the city and bring him back. Shortly after, Alyx returned with Gordon. She also left 6 civil protection units unconscious after they had attempted to bring in the scientist. Back in Kleiner's lab, Gordon was reunited with his old friend, and with no time to waste, it was decided by Isaac and Eli that Gordon should travel to Black Mesa East. There, he could put back on his white coat and help them in their fight. On this significant day, with a completely functional teleporter, Alyx was volunteered to travel between the bases first. In this moment, Barney thought it was important to mention a teleportation attempt that Alyx was not aware of, a failure that had led to the death of a cat. Despite her anxiety and a fear of a similar fate, Alyx was successfully transported through to Black Mesa East. However, on Gordon's turn, Kleiner's head crab, Lamar, jumped into the beam and the teleportation sequence malfunctioned. From Black Mesa East, Alyx, Eli, and Judith watched as Gordon phased between locations, and then he was gone. Luckily, he landed just outside of Kleiner's lab. He would have to traverse the Underground Railroad. Although Alyx had known Gordon for only a short amount of time, she knew how important he was. She also knew how to travel between the bases safely. From Black Mesa East, she did everything she could to help him from a distance.
Black Mesa East to Station 6, do you read? Dr. Freeman is on his way downriver. Lend him the airboat and give him all the help you can. Repeat, Gordon Freeman has returned. It is critical he reaches Black Mesa East.
All Alyx could do was wait and hoped that Gordon survived the journey. Of course, his passage between the bases would be more dangerous than any of hers, as the Combine actively sought him out. As Alyx stood guard, scheduled to watch over Black Mesa East, she was told by a Vortigaunt that Gordon had made it. To greet him, the Vortigaunt took her place and she entered the lab. Even in this moment of happiness, Judith managed to put down Alyx.
Alyx? I thought you were on watch.
The Vortigaunts relieved me so I could come see Gordon. Anyway, I should be in here working on the portal.
I have the repairs well in hand. Someone misjudged the capacity of the Combine thyristor.
Are you blaming me?
No, not at all. It was a calculation error, not a mechanical problem.
Then maybe you should let me do the calculations next time, as well as installing it.
Alyx, really? Sometimes I think you deliberately misunderstand me.
This was why Alyx chose to spend her time away from the lab, even though she liked to work there. After a suggestion by Eli, Alyx instead took Gordon outside and introduced him to the zero-point energy field manipulator and dog. Inside, unknown to the three of them, Judith had alerted an agent of the Combine, Dr. Wallace Breen, of Gordon's arrival. As the chaos unfolded, Alyx, Gordon, and Dog raced towards Eli's lab to help him against the Combine's forces. Unfortunately, on their way, the ceiling collapsed and separated Gordon and Dog from Alyx. Alyx knew how important Gordon was to the survival of the Resistance, so she asked Dog to help him escape through the old tunnels of Ravenholm. While the town had fallen to a headcrab infestation, he would still have a better chance of survival there. With Gordon safe, Alyx discovered that her father and Judith had both been captured by the Combine. Having done everything she could, Alyx left her childhood home for the final time. As the hours passed, Alyx heard word from the Vortigaunt that her father and Mossman had been taken to Nova Prospect. To save them, she needed Gordon. So she reached out to Shorepoint Base, a Resistance base close to an exit of Ravenholm that Gordon would have to pass through.
Gordon, you made it through Ravenholm, thank God. I need your help. They've taken my father. He's been taken to Nova Prospect. The Vortigaunts tracked the ship that made off with him and Judith Mossman. While the trains are still running, I'm gonna hitch a ride. Here's where you come in, Gordon. I need you to make your way along the coast until you get to Nova Prospect. It used to be a high-security prison. It's something much worse than that now. But I think it's still easier to sneak in than to break out.
You wanted to take the coast road? He won't last 5 minutes on foot. It's spawning season for the Antlions.
That's why I called you, Leon. I was hoping you still had the scout car we left with you last summer. The one my dad rigged with the Tau cannon.
Yeah, good idea. Hold on a sec. Norco? Bring the buggy out. Put it on the dock right now.
Gordon Freeman will be driving it.
Will do. I just finished mounting an ammo crate on the back.
Good timing. Okay, Alyx, we're all set.
Thanks, Leon. Gordon, I haven't driven the coast in over a year, but I have no reason to think it's gotten any safer. Meet me in the depot where the trains unload. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in Nova Prospect. Bye for now.
Bye, Alyx.
With a plan set, Alyx boarded the train in secret, arrived at Nova Prospect, and waited in the depot for Gordon to arrive. Shortly after, Alyx and Gordon fought their way through with the sole mission to rescue Eli and Judith. To accomplish this, Alyx utilized every skill she had learned during her upbringing. She fought with the prison soldiers, guided Gordon from afar, manipulated Combine turrets to fire upon their own units. She even hacked into the system in order to access the more secure regions. However, upon doing so, she discovered something that shocked her.
There she is. Wait a minute. How'd she...
It's from your area.
I'm not calling about that. What's she up to? You promised you weren't going to touch Eli. Oh my
The
God.
soldiers were a bit overzealous, I admit, but he was too tempting a prize to simply turn loose. Especially in the absence of Gordon Freeman.
You would have had Freeman if you'd been patient and just waited for my signal.
We weren't entirely sure you were ever going to get around to that. Human loyalties being what they are.
Dr. As I have stated before, you have to let Eli come around on his own.
I have known Dr. Vance far longer than you, my dear. I'm afraid your feelings for him may have blinded you.
Feelings? This has nothing to do with feelings. It's a simple truth that when Eli believes in our...
This is not open to debate, Dr. Mossman.
Doctor, please.
So sorry, Judith. I'm all out of time.
Damn her! I don't believe this!
Alyx had known something was off about Judith Mossman. It had just taken the capture of her father to actually realize what it was. With anger and vengeance in her mind, Alyx pushed further into Nova Prospect to rescue Eli and confront Judith. Even though she had been caught in a lie, Judith attempted to explain that she had only worked to protect Eli, but upon viewing the teleporter that Judith had constructed in this prison for the Combine, Alyx understood what had happened. Judith had stolen her father's work. Even still, Judith claimed some of the work to be hers. Having had Eli called to the chamber, Alyx contacted Dr. Isaac Kleiner in City 17.
Dr. Kleiner!
Yes, Alyx. Where are you?
We're in Nova Prospect, and we're running the Zen emulation for the first time. Are you ready for us?
Ready, willing, and fully enabled.
Good.
We'll send my dad through first. He's in position for... What's that?
And so, Isaac waited, but as the hours passed, his teleporter did not activate. Something bad had happened. The Vortigaunt camp have reported an explosion at Nova Prospekt Depot. The prison is down, swarmed by Antlions. Freeman and Alyx were inside. We can only hope for the best. It has been a couple of days since the Nova Prospekt explosion. There is still no sign of Freeman or Alyx. We may have to face the reality that they are gone. On a positive note, the Vortigaunt trapped in the Citadel have reported that Dr. Vance has been moved there. At least he is safe. This is the time to fight. If we can take down Nova Prospekt, we can take down the Citadel. We need to rescue Dr. Vance. Led by Barney Calhoun, the Resistance took to the streets of City 17 and began to reclaim their planet. Their leader, Eli, was in the Citadel and they needed to save him. However, as Kleiner began to pack up his lab, he heard the familiar sound of his teleporter. Inside of the secret room, Alyx and Gordon had returned. It appeared that the explosion had thrown the duo into a slow teleport. From their perspective, their jump from Nova Prospekt to Kleiner's lab had taken seconds, when in reality, it had been a whole week. Kleiner updated the two of what had happened in their absence, that Eli was fine, and that their actions had led to an uprising. City 17 was a war zone. After Gordon went into the battle zone to rescue Barney, who had been pinned down by snipers, Alyx stayed behind in Kleiner's lab. Despite her need to race ahead with Freeman to rescue her father, Isaac was also very important to her. He had been there through her entire childhood. She had to make sure he was safe and on his way out of City 17 before she could play her part. City 17 had become a war zone for three main parties: the Combine, the Resistance, and the Xenian creatures who had acquired access to the once heavily guarded region through a damaged infrastructure. Having helped Kleiner, Alyx returned to the fight and used every skill she had to give her Resistance family an advantage. She hacked into Combine terminals to open up access points to sealed regions, and she climbed high onto the rooftops to offer strategic support of the Combine locations and to determine the best route to the Citadel. However, as they ventured closer, Alyx was knocked out by one of the Combine guards. When Alyx woke up, she found herself restrained. She did not know how long she had been out, but she did hear the mumbles of familiar voices outside of her containment pod.
To give up their senseless struggle, yet Eli refuses to speak the words that would save them all. Save them? For what?
When her pod eventually opened, Alyx was happy to see her father, but she was quickly devastated to see that Gordon had also been captured. It appeared that Breen simply wanted to use her as a bargaining chip. Despite his hopes, while Alyx did have her mother's eyes, she also had her father's stubborn nature. Breen was a man who did not like to lose. He was also under immense pressure from the Combine. To force Eli to work with him, he threatened to send the scientist and his daughter to their deaths through a Combine portal. As she lay there, helpless, Alyx watched Mossman. The traitor felt bad for what she had done. Judith truly believed she was helping the Resistance, and through her cooperation with the Combine had kept Eli safe. With the threat of the death of Eli, Judith had to act. Alyx was surprised as Judith locked down Breen's office and released the imprisoned Resistance members. In a desperate bid to escape his fate, Breen grabbed the gravity gun taken from Gordon and stunned them with it. In this rare moment to take down the man who had betrayed his entire species, Alyx left her father in the care of Judith. She had proven herself to truly care about Eli and his safety. At the peak of the Citadel, Alyx gave Gordon access to the chamber in which Breen planned to escape this world. She had grown close to the scientist during their time together. Not only was he the symbol of this uprising, but he was also someone she could truly depend on. She asked him to do his worst, but also to be careful. From this control room, Alyx guided Gordon as he climbed the chamber. She was also overjoyed when the scientist launched a dark energy orb at the reactor that powered the tunneling device between Earth and the homeworld of the Combine. With a final strike, the reactor exploded and it appeared that they had won. The connection between their world and Earth was cut off. Breen had fallen to his death, but then the core became unstable. As a wave of energy launched out of the core, Alyx raised her hands to shield herself. When she blinked, she found herself encased in rubble at the base of the Citadel, as Dog pulled her out.
There is much ground to cover, and in fact, I hope to institute a series of useful bulletins. Content ourselves with some relatively meager exposition.
This was the second time Alyx Vance had been saved from a fate of certain death at the hands of something with immense power. As a child, the G-Man had saved her. As an adult, at the peak of the Citadel, a group of Vortigaunts hyper-connected to the Vortessence through the infusion of larval extract had frozen time and teleported her to safety. They saw a future for her. She was important. Alyx did remember the sound of Vortigaunt, but she did not know why. She did not know how she had landed at the bottom of the Citadel. However, she knew that if she had survived, surely Gordon had too. Freeman had been saved just by someone else. The G-Man had pulled him from the peak of the Citadel, but interestingly enough, had left her to her fate, only to have been undone by the Vortigaunts. With a device to track a signal from Gordon's HEV suit, Alyx and Dog looked for Gordon. After they discovered him, Alyx made contact with her dad, and although at first shocked that the three of them were still in the city, Alyx and Gordon were updated on what had happened and what they had to do. The Citadel was unstable. If they, or even the citizens still within the city, had any hope of survival, they would have to enter the unstable structure and stabilize the core just long enough to leave the city. Without question, and to save as many people as she could, Alyx pushed ahead with Gordon and they entered the Citadel. Inside, they fought through Combine guards, and Alyx tapped into the system as Gordon entered the chamber of the core to stabilize it. Alyx was disturbed by the image of the stalkers who were forced to work here. She knew what they were: resistance members and human citizens who had refused to comply with the Combine. Despite their awful fates, Alyx also discovered the coordinates to the Combine overworld with a video file of Judith Mossman sent from her expedition. The Resistance needed to see this. Having stabilized the core, the two escaped the Citadel, fought through the city, and eventually helped Barney get the final refugees out of the city before they also left on the final train. As they moved out of City 17, the Citadel exploded. The power of this began the formation of a super portal and destroyed everything Alyx had ever known. Then the train was derailed by an immense wave of power. Alyx had stolen important information about the Combine from the Citadel. They wanted her dead. After her survival of the train crash, Combine hunters were deployed to take her and Gordon out. After the discovery of a communication station in the Outlands, Eli asked that the duo make their way to the White Forest Resistance base to safety. However, on their way, Alyx was viciously attacked by a Combine hunter and left for dead, as Gordon could only watch helplessly trapped under the rubble of a building. This was Alyx's third close death encounter, and just like the last two, she was saved. A passing Vortigaunt of the local Victory Mine resistance camp had become aware of the commotion, as several Antlions came to the weak body of Alyx to drag her back to their cave to feed their young. The Vortigaunt launched waves of energy at them. Alyx's condition was grave, and after she was brought back to their camp, the Vortigaunt explained to Gordon that she clung to the margins of life, that the only way she could survive was if they delved deep into the Vortessence. For this, they required the larval extract of an Antlion. The Vortigaunt did their best to stabilize the young Vance as the Freeman entered the mines below to recover the extract. Just as her heart stopped, Gordon returned with it, and they began the procedure. If Alyx was lost, they believed they would lose everything. As Alyx woke up, she felt better. However, a message had been instilled during her weakness by the G-Man.
When you see your father, relay these words. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
As a result of the Vortigaunt's intervention, Alyx and Gordon eventually arrived at White Forest, their life force intertwined with each other. Finally reunited with her father, the group began the final push to complete a plan that had been in the works for decades. The leader of this base had worked on a rocket that would close a super portal if it were to form. The fall of the Citadel had generated one of these. If the portal were to mature, the Combine would return and there would be no mercy. Without a suppression field to remove the ability to conceive children, Eli also suggested that Gordon and Alyx should give him grandchildren. She couldn't blame an old man for wanting grandkids. Alyx also gave the Resistance the data packet she had almost lost her life protecting, in which the team discovered that Mossman had been attacked on her expedition. She also relayed the message from the G-Man.
Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
What did you say?
Dad! Okay. It's okay. Just...
Alyx did not understand the significance of this message. It was more of a warning. The last time Eli had heard this, he had ignored it and the resonance cascade had occurred. What could he be referring to this time? Removing the Combine's access to Earth? The rescue of Judith Mossman, or the Borealis? Even so, to protect Alyx, he did not let her know just how affected he was by these words. This was an important time for the Resistance, and Alyx wanted to help in any way. With Gordon off protecting the base from an assault, Alyx found herself a new project, a helicopter that could take them to Mossman's base when they were ready. It just needed a little bit of work.
We did it! Oh, we sure did. I was getting control of myself.
Yes! We did it!
The successful launch of this rocket had come with a lot of sacrifice, but it had completely cut off the Combine from Earth. This was a historic moment in human history. Still, there was more work to do. With the helicopter fixed up, Eli entered its hangar with Alyx and Gordon to send them off to find Judith Mossman. However, this moment would become one of the worst memories of Alyx's life. Almost instantly, two Combine advisors crashed through the wall. Although the Combine had been cut off from Earth, the units still on the planet continued to fight. With their telekinetic powers, they launched Gordon and Alyx at a wall, and the young Resistance member watched as an advisor picked up her father He asked that she did not look as the creature plunged its tongue into the back of his head. To her look, Dog did crash through the ceiling and he fought off these creatures, but it was too late. Eli was dead.
No. Oh my god.
Alyx had always shown a positive and optimistic view in a dark, cruel world. Eli was her moral compass and blueprint. How she reacted or changed after this moment is unknown. Would she seek vengeance and grow cold in her actions, or would she bounce back and continue on in her father's honor? As of now, we simply do not know. The G-Man had attempted to manipulate these humans into performing tasks that served whatever plan he and his employers had for a future event. Due to the Vortigaunt's interference with Gordon Freeman, he deemed that he required a replacement. The G-Man had saved Alyx Vance when she was a child. She would be perfect. Only he did not want this version of Alyx. He wanted another. With his power, the entity traveled through space and time 5 years before. In the classic G-Man fashion, he knew what was to come, and he orchestrated a test of sorts so that Alyx could prove herself as a valuable asset. The G-Man had himself captured by Combine forces and placed in the Vault, a Combine prison powered by Vortessence energy, and this action acted as a domino. Eli Vance was captured, and Alyx was thrown onto a quest to rescue him, a quest that was successful and led her directly to the G-Man himself. Alyx freed the entity trapped inside of this prison under the impression that he was the missing Black Mesa scientist, Dr. Gordon Freeman. Only upon the release of this entity, Alyx met the G-Man face to face. He knew her very well and offered her a Hobson's choice, just like he had to Gordon, an illusion of choice with only one real answer. He showed Alyx what had happened 5 years into the future, that her father would die. However, she could change this, and she did.
Good. As a consequence of your action, this entity will continue, and this entity will not.
The death of the advisor allowed Eli's life to continue. With Alyx in his hands and having shown herself to be capable, the G-Man hired her to replace Gordon Freeman against her will. She just wanted to go home. 5 years later, in that very moment in which Eli was saved from the Combine advisor, he looked around and saw that Alyx was gone, plucked from this moment by the G-Man. He knew that the mysterious entity had something to do with his daughter's disappearance. The timeline had changed, and he and Gordon were going to find her. As for what the G-Man had planned for Alyx, well, there is that chance we will never find out. Alyx Vance was one of the most fascinating characters in the Half-Life timeline. She was saved at a very young age by the G-Man. She was later saved by the Vortigaunt after the G-Man saved Gordon instead of her, and then she was saved again by another group of the Vortigaunts. Alyx was able to defend herself well, but she also required the help of those around her. Everyone saw a future event in which Alyx was important. There was something she would do, but we, the player, may never find out what that was. She was brave, strong, and knew how to read people extremely well. Who knows what her future holds? The new leader of the Resistance, the mother of Gordon's children, the person who helps Gordon take down the Combine, maybe all three. As a result of the Vortigaunt procedure, her life force is connected to Gordon's, their fates intertwined. It is safe to say that whatever she does, Gordon will be right there with her. Here, we explore the lore and story behind the Quarantine Zone. The dark, dystopian streets of City 17 offered a sad look at how the world had once functioned before the arrival of the Combine. This had once been a strong Eastern European city, but had been transformed into a prison to house and monitor the human population that had been transported here like cattle. In this new world order, the Combine controlled the human population and imprisoned the Vortigaunt, a unique species that had an impressive natural connection to an unseen force of power, the Vortessence. While the Combine had shown their force and might, there were other threats not only across the wasteland, but also right within the city. The Combine themselves were brutal and ruthless in their approach, whereas this other force simply created horrors and torment by nature. Portal storms had ravaged the planet, and with them came seeds, spores, and life from another dimension, the border world of Zen. As these arrived on Earth, they simply behaved as nature had intended. They sprouted and spread. Zenian flora and fauna was entirely different to that of Earth's. It was actively hostile, intelligent by design, and difficult to eradicate. That was just the plant life. The creatures of the border world were worse, and soon the Combine became aware of this problem. The Combine required City 17 to store, indoctrinate, and control a portion of the human population. The issue was that as the headcrabs wandered, barnacle spores formed on ceilings and antlions created nests. They not only killed the human and Combine units that encountered them, but they also got in the way of daily Combine operations. This was a growing issue and would only get worse if they did not intervene. Those who survived the dangers of this region of City 17 abandoned their homes in haste as the Combine decided to quarantine several blocks of the city with a smart barrier. Upon the completion of the protective construction, the alien empire ordered the human population not to enter. Anyone discovered within was threatened with capital persecution, to be killed on sight. As for the bodies of those on the metro that had made their final stop, or the workers who had been killed by Zenian forces, they were simply left to rot. This infestation of growths, fungi, spore spreaders, snappers, light stalks, bloaters, and coral ears had expanded for blocks and blocks through the sewer system and was dangerous to anyone who encountered it. The Combine knew how to conquer and dominate, but it appeared that in the early stages of the infestation, even they struggled to find a way to contain it. At one point, they discovered that a solution extracted from the antlion had a pretty great effect when applied to the Zenian growths. Upon this discovery, the Combine set up antlion farms within a tanker yard close to an antlion nest. Within here, they captured the antlion they could and milked them of this substance. Interestingly enough, there was another section of this farm in which an antlion was restrained and connected to several imprisoned Vortigaunts in pods. It is unknown what the Combine hoped to gain from this. However, what is known is that the Vortigaunt did rely on an antlion extract to enhance their connection to the Vortessence, a power source the Combine had acquired access to through the imprisoned Vortigaunt. This antlion solution was incredibly important in the reduction of the spread of the Zenian infestation. To deploy it, the Combine hired human workers to enter the quarantine zone donned in hazmat suits to spray every Zenian infected surface they saw. In theory, this would have been a fantastic plan. Even so, while the majority of the dangers of the Xenian plant life were almost simple to avoid with protective clothing and a gas mask, the creatures of Xen were not. Headcrabs latched onto the heads of the workers, burrowed into their brains and transformed them into zombies. Barnacles formed on ceilings and simply waited for something to touch their tongues. Bloaters grew on the walls, and when they detected the movement of anything, they swelled and exploded. This not only severely injured or killed whatever had triggered it, but it also helped spread more of the Xenian seeds and spores. Alongside this, many attempts were made to reduce the spread entirely. Sandbags blocked off doorways, and Combine security doors and force fields were installed, but these did not stop the Xenian expansion. From the outside of the quarantine zone, the population of City 17 was kept in the dark of the activities that happened within. It was once an entire region with homes, hotels, a distillery, a zoo, a train line, and many more iconic spots left to rot. The only way in and out was through checkpoints under guard by Combine units. As the years passed, City 17 continued on under the Combine regime. Humanity lived in fear under constant surveillance. Around them, their human-built structures were transformed by Combine machinery and technology into strongholds and bases of operations. Everything had changed. Yet, the segregation of the quarantine zone had left it mostly free from Combine influence. In essence, the Xenian infestation had almost turned this region of City 17 into a time capsule of the old world. The metro system displayed advertisements for vodka, a popular holiday destination, a cheese dream, shows and vehicles. Around the nostalgia, however, lay the growths and dangers of the dimension of Xen. Although quarantined, this region was still of some use to the Combine, and they did continue in their attempts to contain the spread. But more dangers revealed themselves as Xen's flora adapted to Earth's landscape and climate. An interesting discovery made only within the QZ was that of the armored headcrab. This creature appeared to have once been a simple headcrab, but as it had navigated the dangers of Xen on Earth, a fungal growth had formed on its back. This relationship appeared to be mutually beneficial. The fungal infection was strong enough to protect the headcrab from the danger of the world, and in return, the headcrab allowed the infection to spread wherever it traveled to. Another creature was also discovered only within the quarantine zone. Dubbed the Reviver, this blue ball of flesh showed the natural ability to launch electricity at will. It also displayed the ability to reanimate dead flesh and control it. In appearance and nature, it would seem that it shared a common ancestry with the headcrab species. For the scavengers and those who broke into the quarantine zone to escape the Combine regime, they would see how the Xenian nature had claimed the once acclaimed locations of the city. That was if they survived their journey. They would find how the final guests at the Northern Star Hotel would stay there forever as they were claimed as a food source by the overgrowth, tentacles, and plants. Some became a part of the walls themselves, and for any who entered this horrific region, they would smell what appeared to be a mixture of rotting animal and ammonia. It appeared that the human remains attracted the plant life as they grew towards and through the corpses. For the locations deemed more valuable than the others to the Combine, infestation control teams were sent to at least protect them from the expansion. The Holden Company processing plant and Golden Lion Distillery were two of these. The team that was sent to secure the distillery, however, would enter a nightmare within. as they set up checkpoints to secure each region, accessible only with a keycard. One of the workers inhaled a fungal spore from a spore cloud. Over the following hours, they avoided the barnacles that clung to the ceiling and watched out for head crabs. But inside of that one worker, the spore began to seed. It spread across his system and mutated him in what can only be described as a fate worse than death. His body became the host for an aggressive Zenian plant as his head ripped open into 2 pieces, and in between, a mouth formed. As for the rest of his team, they also fell to the dangers of this claustrophobic region as the mutated worker wandered the distillery under the control of the plant and spread the spores of the Zenian infestation. Although an extremely dangerous region, human units were still sent in to secure specific landmarks and structures. A train line ran from City 17 through the quarantine zone into the wasteland towards other Combine strongholds. To keep this line operational, Fairview Junction was guarded fiercely by heavily armed soldiers. Towards the tanker yard and home to the Antlion farm, the central zoo fell into decay. This place had once been visited by all around to learn about Earth's animals and ecosystem. Ironically enough, the animals that had once been sent here and watched by thousands fell prey to the local antlion nests and putrid Zenian growths. Within the nature exhibit and hallways, the human workers who had given tours of this facility now wandered in pain under the control of the parasitic headcrab. On an educational board, Central Zoo displayed how nature had once functioned, how the smaller animals such as ants ate leaves and foliage. These were eaten by the black-crested bulbul. The bulbul fell victim to the large-scaled pit viper, and up the scale it went until the Bengal tiger ate so many animals below it. The introduction of headcrabs and barnacles entirely changed this food chain. Even Zenian trees, tentacles, and bloaters added a morbid yet interesting mix to the new laws of nature. Everywhere within this once popular tourist attraction offered a sad reminder of how far this world had fallen. And even still, only the bravest of humanity, or those who had submitted to the Combine, would ever see it in this corrupted state, under the control of the local antlion colony. Despite having become a deadly, interdimensional sector of the worst fates imaginable, those who traversed into the QZ for freedom, adventure, or the discovery of lost artifacts set up small bases and homes just out of the eyes of the Combine. One of these homes was a bit more elaborate than those of the human scavenger. Having escaped the torture of the Combine, a weak and vulnerable Vortigaunt managed to break his way into the quarantine zone, and he hid within the sewers. Although the Vortigaunt were seen by humanity as a powerful species due to their ability to form a strong electrical current from nothing, Gary was different. In his disturbing interaction with the alien empire, they had drilled into his head, and as a result, his connection to the mighty, powerful force of the Vortessence was severed. In these fleeting moments of his connection to the Vortessence, Gary created a mural of events that had and would happen in the future in a drained river. The quarantine zone was a terrifying region for many, but Gary's species had lived on Zen before they had been pulled through to Earth. This was almost like a second home to him. In the safety of the drainage tunnels, Gary created a home, caught headcrabs for sustenance, and even created a sort of herb garden with the flora of Zen. For Gary at least, the QZ was a place of safety. Now, the quarantine zone was one of the most secretive locations within the City 17 region and the Wasteland. There was, however, something huge that the Combine did that was covered up extremely well. Before this region had been blocked off, the Combine detected something, an entity that had gotten in the way of their plans and had avoided capture with ease. The G-Man was not what he appeared to be, and on a standard day, the entity appeared within a tenement building. In this rare moment, the Combine used everything they had to capture the G-Man with the Vortessence energy they had procured from captured Vortigauns. This action, along with the use of a powerful prison they had constructed, the Vault, displaced the entire building the G-Man stood in, along with the human population inside. The G-Man survived this action and was trapped in stasis with the Vortessence energy. As for the humans who had lived in the building, they appeared as ghostly, eerie echoes, stuck in a moment, forever. After the Vault had successfully performed its main action, it was raised into the sky, safe from any interference. To keep the G-Man trapped and the Vault powered, the Combine created Vortigaunt pod farms to generate a constant source of energy. In doing this, 8 substations were constructed across the QZ and connected to the Vault through large power lines. The Vortigaunt inside of these farms were forced into an existence of torment in darkness as they were treated like batteries. One of these substations was constructed and attached to the side of the Northern Star Hotel. This meant that Infestation Control had to keep a hand on the spread of the infestation inside, a task that cost many lives. The Vault could be regarded as the most important Combine feature within the quarantine zone. To protect it, a second smart barrier was formed around it, and the only way to access the Vault was from a console heavily secured by Combine forces. Having been constructed within the QZ, it meant that no one outside of this region even knew of its existence. For the most part, the quarantine zone remained undisturbed by the population of City 17. This changed approximately 15 years after their occupation on the planet. During a secret resistance raid of a Combine stronghold, Dr. Alyx Vance and Russell discovered the blueprints of what they believed to be a Combine superweapon. The exploration of the Combine system, however, alerted the alien force of an intrusion. Over the subsequent hours, the region of the city was sent into high alert as Dr. Alyx Vance and his daughter were placed into Combine custody. Alyx was later rescued from her detainment by Russell, and in order to save her father from the terrible fate of Nova Prospect, she and the scientist decided to rescue him, a task that would force her to travel through the quarantine zone. On Alyx's journey, she discovered checkpoint 620. As she approached it and explored, she found the bodies of the workers, avoided the Barnacles that had migrated from the zone onto the roofs, and the headcrabs that had sought only to control the next humanoid they found. After Alyx opened the entrance, she travelled through a heavily Xenian-infested metro system and was offered a view into an old world of culture and freedom that had been taken from her when she was a child. Cheese, vacations, and floppy disks of old games. Within the drainage sewers, Alyx found the Vortigaunt mural, and further in, she met Gary. In a brief conversation, Gary asked that Alyx save his kin that had been trapped by the Combine. Alyx did save her father at the guarded Fairview Junction after she crashed his train, but it was also in this region that she witnessed the execution of a scavenger that had also entered the QZ. Throughout the rest of her exploration of the quarantine zone, Alyx discovered the vault, saved one of the Vortigaunt trapped in the substation of the Northern Star, survived a deadly encounter with Jeff in the distillery, named by a scavenger called Larry, fought through the Central Zoo's Antlions, and in an attempt to rescue who she believed to be Gordon Freeman, Alyx accidentally crashed the vault into the ground. The Combine had worked hard to set up a system within the quarantine zone to hold the G-Man, but in a matter of hours, a lone resistance member with the help of the Free Vortigaunt had dismantled their entire network. The quarantine zone was one of the Combine's biggest failures, and after the release of the G-Man, it appears that this multi-dimensional alien empire no longer had a use for this region. This Xenian-infected region of City-17 was very significant. It became the home of the Vault, which was important on its own, but it also offered humanity a glimpse into something that even the Combine struggled to fight against, an infection that spread without mercy. The QZ was a time capsule of the old world, mostly untouched by Combine propaganda, influence, or torment, at their hands at least. Each region in this contaminated area had a story that was waiting to be told, a hotel that turned its last guests into eternal parts of the structure, a metro that showed just how far the world had fallen, and the introduction of new species of creatures that were not spotted outside of the walls. These were just some of the locations within the quarantine zone discovered by Alyx. As she explored only a small percentage, there would have likely been even more locations that may have held their own significance and stories. Alyx did only find one of the 8 Vortigaunt pod farms. What were the others connected to? 5 years after the fall of the Vault, the Grand Citadel of City-17 exploded, and with it, everything within and around City-17 was destroyed. This would have put an end to the quarantine zone as it was. However, the flora and fauna of Xen was resilient. There is always the chance that the Xenian infestation could have survived. If anything, maybe this explosion spread the seeds further afield to expand the growths. Here, we explore the lore and story behind the terrifying barnacle species of Half-Life. The border world of Xen was once just a dimension that connected to other worlds across space. Over many years, it collected physical fragments and life from the dimensions it connected to. Nothing was native to Xen, but as each new life form migrated over, they made it their own and created a pretty interesting ecosystem. Each animal and plant found their place on these floating islands, and with each addition, the food chain adapted. Houndai hunted in packs, the head crab was sought out by the Vortigaunt as a food source, the ichthyosaurs consumed almost anything that entered their waters. These were the active predators. However, the immobile predators were not seen as much of a threat until it was too late. On the roofs of the natural cave formations of Xen, the barnacle species waited for their prey. Upon contact with their tongues that dangled to the base of the cave, they became extremely sticky and pulled up what they had caught to their terrifying mouths. The strength of their tongue was also immense, as they often wrapped themselves around anything they could of their prey to keep them. Whenever a barnacle had caught something, it was almost a certain death. The Vortigaunt learned to avoid the cave regions, and if they really had to enter one, they would make sure to look up for a hanging tongue. On Zen, the history of the Barnacle and how they functioned was not something that was thought about too much. Yet, upon the arrival of humanity and their thirst for knowledge, not only would the Barnacle and their kind be explored, but they would also have another opportunity to migrate and expand to somewhere new. On Earth, the Black Mesa Research Facility experimented with and explored teleportation technology, just like Aperture Science had. While Aperture had managed to generate connecting portals from one point to another, Black Mesa discovered how to access an entire new world, Zen. In humanity's natural thirst to understand the universe, survey teams were sent through to Zen by the Black Mesa administration with the goal to explore this world and bring back samples and specimens for study. On one of these teams, Dr. Lewis Donaldson entered a cave and accidentally walked into something he believed was a rope. However, upon contact, this rope became extremely sticky and attached itself to the doctor. The following 20 seconds would have felt like an eternity to Donaldson as he was lifted into the air slowly. When he looked up, he saw the rows of sharp teeth waiting for him. Despite his best efforts, Lewis Donaldson was eaten alive and his body was digested by the Barnacle's stomach fluid. Dr. Lewis Donaldson had become the first human victim of a Barnacle. From the ground, his team watched in horror as this had occurred, but there was nothing they could have done. Upon their return to Earth with samples and specimens of a Barnacle, they gave this creature the taxonomic designation of Cirripedia donaldsonia in honor of their fallen colleague. With the collected samples, the team discovered that these creatures lived for approximately 500 years, and after they had begun their gestation in colonies on a surface, they stayed there for their whole lives. Those that survived grew in locations with a consistent amount of food that wandered beneath them. As for those who grew in regions without any traffic, they died out. Just like many animals in nature, the strongest and smartest survived. In this case, the lucky did. A dissection and further study of the Cirripedia donaldsonia revealed these formed on the roofs of structures and simply waited for prey to wander below them. Their whole body was a fleshy mass, with a large mouth of 2 rows of sharp teeth. Their tongues were the most interesting and important part of the Barnacle. Not only were they strong enough to lift an entire human, but they appeared to have the ability to activate and deactivate how sticky their tongues were. The team believed this natural adhesive was possible as a result of tiny hairs on the tongue, a way for them to pick up and drop something at will. Because of the limited barnacles they discovered on Zen, the team were unable to explore just how they functioned on the food chain. However, the weapons division did find another use for the creatures. This team managed to remove a barnacle from the surface it was attached to, kept it alive, and transformed it into a sort of weapon, the barnacle grapple, designed to pull the user to a specific spot. Although Black Mesa had attempted to learn as much as they could about the Barnacle, only the survivors of the Black Mesa incident would actually get a chance to see them in a new, natural environment. While it has not been confirmed officially how the Barnacle migrated to new locations, it is believed that they generated spores and the wind brought them to new regions. Shortly after the Resonance Cascade and the Portal Storms, spores of the Barnacles migrated to Earth and they formed in colonies across the globe as the years passed. During this time, the Combine also invaded the planet and subjected humanity to some of the worst treatments imaginable. Held in settlements, these people were kept in the dark about what had happened to the world outside of the settlements. Meanwhile, in the wasteland of Earth, the creatures of Zen made this place their home. For the human population that escaped and attempted to make it on their own, They were surprised and killed quickly by the dangers out here. Specifically, in caves and tunnels, clusters of barnacles just waited for their next meal. Still, humanity was not their only source of food. In the mines taken over by the Antlion, countless barnacle clusters formed. The Antlion themselves were blind and relied on sounds and vibrations to navigate their surroundings. As the barnacle did not move unless something touched their tongues, the Antlion became easy prey for their species. As grubs constantly grew into Antlions, the barnacle always had a meal. As the resistance grew across the City 17 region, they shared their knowledge of the dangers of Zen. To navigate their world, they learned to always explore their surroundings before entering a region with a roof. They also learned to use objects around them to trigger their sensations on a barnacle's tongue to distract them as they passed. For those with ammo to spare, despite the terrifying nature of a barnacle, they were fairly easy to take out in comparison to an antlion or headcrab, as a few bullets killed them. However, the death of a barnacle often led to their stomachs dropping, along with their stomach acid and the bones of their victims, and there were always more of them. The arrival of the Combine had brought chaos and terror to this world, but even they struggled to contain the Zenian infestation. At one point, an entire section of City 17 was quarantined because spores, seeds, and hostile life sprouted all around. In their efforts, workers were sent into the quarantine zone to neutralize the threat, but more always came, and these workers fell victim to this alien life. Amongst these was the barnacle, and as long as they were able to form and grow, there would always be more of them to wrap their tongues around their prey as they ate them alive. Zen had collected many interesting yet terrifying creatures through its connection to countless worlds and dimensions. The poor population of Earth sadly had to encounter these after the Resonance Cascade. A death at the tongue and teeth of a barnacle could be considered one of the worst fates in the entire Half-Life series. Yes, the transformation into a stalker or zombie can be considered worse, but the moment in which a victim was caught on the tongue and watched as they were slowly dragged into the air and into the teeth of this creature to be eaten alive is horrendous. The barnacle existed outside of the war between humanity and the Combine, and they will surely be there after it is over. Despite who wins, just like a weed, they will always pop up and form somewhere new. Dr. Lewis Donaldson may have been the first victim, but he was for sure not the last by a long stretch. Here we explore in the lore and story behind the entire Antlion species. Many years ago, on a planet very far away from Earth, there was a planet home to various species, two of which known were the Vortigaunt and the Antlion. From the stories told by the Vortigaunt, they were the dominant lifeform on the planet, and as such, farmed and harvested the natural resources around them to construct and strengthen their community. One of these resources was the Antlion species. Underground, this vast, intelligent, and complex species dug deep and formed many labyrinths of tunnels and caves across the planet. In these large colonies, the Antlion thrived, bred, and lived in a clear, structured class system. The deeper into these colonies, the more important these regions were to the Antlion, and as a result, the more protective they became against intruders. Currently, 5 different subspecies of Antlion have been discovered, and each one brought something very important to their colony. These were the Grub, Worker, Soldier, Guard, and Guardian. From the perspective of a native of planet Earth, these Antlions acted in a very similar manner to ants, insects that also were a part of a hierarchy system, followed the orders of a higher classed member, and worked together to build a large colony. The Antlion lived predominantly underground. In these dark regions, they did not require sight, and due to this, they were completely blind. To explore their surrounding, these creatures of an average of 3 to 5 feet tall instead relied on two main factors of navigation: pheromones and vibrations. Using vibrations, they were able to detect collisions and other creatures around them. With pheromones, they could tell whether an entity around them was an antlion or even tell the rank they placed in their caste system. On the other hand, they could also tell whether it was an unknown entity or intruder in their nest. In the case of an intruder, the antlion all came together to take it out. Deep in the nests, the antlion created nectariums, heavily protected parts of the antlion colonies that spanned for miles, and these were home to large hives of antlion larvae. Essentially, the place where the next generation of antlion grew and were later born. Above ground, the Vortigaunt had discovered a very important use of antlion larvae. Through experimentation, they learned that if they extracted the antlion larvae, they could use it to enhance their connection to a powerful, unseen force they called the Vortessence. This force allowed them to pull energy from nothing, heal deep wounds, and even manipulate time, just to name a few abilities. In their words, this extract divided the false veils of the Vortessence, and as a result, turned them purple and amplified their connection to it. The antlion were very protective of these regions of their nests, so the Vortigaunt looked for a way to enter without harm. Eventually, they manipulated the pheromones of the antlion guard, one of the highest subspecies in the antlion hierarchy, and with these pheromones, they tricked the lowest subspecies into thinking they were in charge. As long as they avoided the other higher members of the caste, they entered the nests, harvested from the nectariums, and essentially formed an endless supply of antlion larvae extract. For an unknown amount of time, the Vortigaunt farmed antlion for their extract, and antlion husbandry became an ancestral practice for them. Together, the Vortigaunt and antlion thrived. The colony still grew even with Vortigaunt interference. However, something bad was on its way. Sometime after, the Universal Union, also known as the Combine Empire, discovered this world. Just as they had done to countless species on the traversal of the multiverse, the Combine attacked the planet with everything they had with two main goals in mind. The first, to capture the species on the planet so that they could be experimented with to see if they could be adapted into new soldiers or new workers in their armies, and secondly, survey the planet for any resources they could use to strengthen their forces. This war, just like so many others, led to the fall of Vortigaunt society and their connection to the Antlion. Through constant Combine reinforcements, the Vortigaunt fell, even with their Antlion extract-imbued powers. To their luck, both Vortigaunt and Antlion discovered a gateway to a passing border world, Zen. With this miraculous interdimensional pathway, they crossed over and left their planet behind. After this moment, this period of Antlion history is currently unknown. They lived on Zen and likely formed nests to survive on this dimension of floating islands. Unfortunately, once again, war led to their migration to another planet, planet Earth, after a resonance cascade ripped a hole in space and pulled them through. All over the planet, aggressive portal storms pulled through creatures from Zen onto Earth. Scattered around on a new world, the Antlion had to once again rebuild and create safe regions for them to thrive. The human population attempted to fight back against the constant waves of Zenian arrivals, but each species had to be fought in a different way. Headcrabs took control of the humans, Barnacles ate them, Vortigaunt defended themselves against conflict, and the Antlion defended regions they had claimed for themselves as Antlion workers began forming new tunnels. During these portal storms, the Combine also came across Earth and began their own war with the humans and the other species that got in their way. Only a mere 7 hours after the Combine waged war with planet Earth, humanity accepted defeat and offered their submission. In their weakened state, the human and Vortigaunt population formed a friendly relationship and followed the orders of their new rulers, the Combine. Out in the open regions of Earth, the territorial antlion wiped out Earth's livestock and pets that would have normally lived peacefully on the coast, farmlands, and various other once habitable regions as they built nests and expanded vastly. Soon, many areas across the planet became extremely dangerous places to explore. The Antlion were incredible hunters and relied on the intruders of their land as sources of food for their weaker members. Over the years, Earth became a barren wasteland due to the influx of Xenian flora and fauna. The Combine saw the Antlion habitation as pests, just as they saw the other creatures that had come from Xen, and after analysis of them, they developed technology to keep the Antlion from important regions, human cities, and strongholds. The Antlion constantly wanted to expand, and these regions were in their way. The Combine learned that the Antlion relied on vibrations to effectively see and navigate their surroundings. To this, they developed and installed a network of resistors, also named thumpers, across the wasteland. These large machines, when active, occasionally slammed into the ground and sent out violent vibrations into the area. As the Antlion used vibrations to explore their surroundings, their ability to detect vibrations was much more sensitive than many other species, and as a result, if they came into close contact with a restrictor, it overwhelmed, blinded, confused, and hurt them. So, the Antlion learned to stay clear of these machines. From an outside perspective, the Antlion were a dangerous territorial species that humanity just needed to stay away from to survive. When looked at and studied, this species were found to be fascinating and fell into 5 different subspecies. Each one had an important part to play. Deep inside of the twisted, confusing Antlion colonies, this species began their life cycle in the Nectarium. It is unknown how this species mated, but what is known is that they started as larvae in blue honeycombs. Over the years, there have been many theories on how they mated. A king, a queen, there was even a resistance member that claimed there was even a mating season. Ultimately, it is currently known only by the Antlion themselves. Regardless, from here, these grew into grubs. In this early stage of the Antlion life cycle, the grubs were essentially helpless and relied on the more developed Antlion to protect them and bring them the food they needed to grow. These meals often came in the form of prey that had trespassed on Antlion territory. On Earth, this was mostly unfortunate humans who were unable to defend themselves. As small, translucent creatures, they were extremely vulnerable to almost any sort of pressure, and with their fragility in mind, they were kept within the claustrophobic tunnels. Although the Antlion were blind, other species noted that the grubs contained a glowing yellow substance inside of them that illuminated the walls around them. The Combine, upon discovery of this yellow substance, experimented with it and learned that it had incredible healing properties. So they either entered these nests or farmed their own Antlion grubs to harvest vast quantities of this substance and used it to create health kits for their soldiers. In some cases, they even placed grubs within health kits that, when attached to Combine stations, squashed the grubs inside to heal the unit that possessed it. The Antlion fiercely protected their grubs to the best of their ability. Almost helpless, the grubs did have a trick that at least slightly helped them evade death or even detection. The grubs could produce a strong thread that allowed them to seal off tunnels in their colonies. This was all they could really do to defend themselves against a potential threat. The grubs were and still are one of the most important parts of an Antlion colony. So, the Antlion ranked higher in their caste protected them with their lives. The vast Antlion colonies each consisted of miles and miles of intricate, confusing tunnels. But how were these created so quickly? The Antlion worker subspecies had the natural ability to produce and project a corrosive acid at will. This in turn allowed them to quickly create and expand their nests through most surfaces. Their main function within their caste was to build their colonies. However, they were also effective as a defensive unit if an intruder did enter the colony. The Antlion workers' acid was extremely corrosive, and they knew how to weaponize it. From afar, they were able to project their acid at a target, and if successful, they would then take the remains of the intruder to the Antlion grubs to feed them. The workers mostly attacked from afar and retreated when in close combat, but on occasion, they were also noted to use their claws to swipe. For creatures that moved around quite often, they also shared the odd antlion trait of having their back legs at the front of their body and their front legs at the back. Regardless, this did not stop them from moving around efficiently. The maze-like cave systems of these colonies often had steep drops, and the Antlion workers navigated these easily with their wings. Although this subspecies had created a claustrophobic safe home for the rest of its species, even they could not protect them from all intruders. Just like the rest of its species, the workers were blind and relied on pheromones and vibrations to navigate their environment. Yet, there was a species that had also migrated from Xen that appeared to be the perfect antlion predator: the Barnacle. By nature, the barnacle species formed and grew in clusters on the ceilings of locations. Here, they simply waited for their prey to hit their long, hanging tongues. Upon impact, these tongues wrapped themselves around their victims and pulled them up to a large, gaping mouth with sharp teeth. These creatures did not move until touched, and therefore were undetectable by the various species of antlion that moved below them. Therefore, an antlion nest became a perfect location for a barnacle to form. Every colony needs hunters, and the Antlion soldier subspecies perfectly filled this role. These were also the most commonly seen of the Antlion by the population across the wasteland. In Eastern Europe, the wasteland was filled with many Antlion colonies, one of which was developed deep underground along the coast. The occupation of these colonies made these predominantly sand-based regions extremely dangerous for anyone who attempted to pass them. Along the beaches, groups of Antlion soldiers burrowed themselves into the sand and rock and simply waited. Upon the detection of a vibration from above, the soldiers clawed themselves out of their holes and attacked with full force. These ambushes kept their respective colonies safe, and even allowed them to supply their prey as food for the rest of the nest inside. As the hunters of the caste, their hard shells mostly protected them from gunfire and general weaponry, and their wings allowed them to fly into the air to evade damage or hunt down their prey if they attempted to escape. Upon close contact, the soldiers made use of their extremely sharp teeth and brutal claws to massacre anything unfortunate enough to have trespassed on their land. These were mostly responsible for sourcing food for their colony, and so they hunted in groups to ensure their prey had a very small chance of escape. The Antlion soldiers' tactic of ambushing in large groups often caught their prey off guard, even if they had entered the region prepared for battle. For those unable to fight and aware of how the Antlion hunted, they did their best to stay off the sand when they passed through this region. Just one footstep on the sand led to a vibration that could end their lives. For some, this worked, but for others, they misjudged a step or a jump and became antlion food in the claustrophobic tunnels below. The territorial nature of the antlion species meant that their regions were mostly unvisited. However, this blind rage that came with protecting their land also sometimes led to their demise. The antlion could not swim, and the Combine and Resistance knew this, so if they could, they made their way to the closest safe body of water and watched the antlion drown. The Antlion soldiers were and still are extremely terrifying creatures to encounter in the wasteland. Over the years of their occupation of the planet, many great minds and fighters have lost their lives to them and their intelligent hunting practices. With the Antlion soldiers in charge of bringing back food and protecting the entrances of their colonies, the Antlion guards were typically discovered to watch over the outer perimeter and entrances. These, along with the Guardian, were the largest of the Antlion species and stood much taller than the rest of their kind. The Antlion guards were essentially seen as one of the highest in the Antlion hierarchy, and as such, they kept order as the grubs, workers, and soldiers listened to them. In return, the guard offered help to the workers if an intruder managed to get past the soldiers. The guards were and still are one of the most difficult of the species to take down due to their heavy build and tough carapace that protect them from the majority of man-made weaponry. Alongside this, the Antlion Guard were extremely dangerous to encounter in tight spaces as they used their weight and power to charge at a target, using their carapace almost like a battering ram. This subspecies were also noted to have great memories and had a simple but effective tactic if they ever were attacked by a group. They focused on one target at a time as their hard armor protected them, taking them down one by one until every threat was neutralized. The Vortigaunts knew how important the Antlion Guard were to a colony from their days of Antlion farming. With this, they created a procedure in which they extracted the pheromones of a guard by striking a dead one with their vortessence. With the pheromones available, they converted them into a pod. When used, the Vortigaunt walked freely among the lower-ranked Antlion in the hierarchy, as they believed them to be of a higher level. While the Pheropod was extremely useful, the ability to take down an Antlion guard was still a dangerous task to perform. This method of accessing Antlion tunnels was not entirely foolproof, as the Pheropods did not have an effect on other guards or guardians. Regardless, the Vortigaunt shared their secrets with the other members of the Resistance so that they could work together against the Combine. Much deeper underground in the Antlion nests, the toughest of the Antlion species was found, the Antlion Guardian. These roamed the tunnels and actively searched for intruders. As stated earlier, these held a similar physical resemblance to the Antlion Guard. Still, the Guard would never be found this deep in the colonies, and their role in the nest was arguably the most important. For each Nectarium hive formed in an Antlion colony, a new Antlion Guardian was assigned to protect it. The larval clusters allowed the birth of new grubs, but entities such as the Vortigaunt and the Combine sought other uses for them. So, the Antlion Guardian's main purpose was to watch over the larvae and eggs. This connection to the Nectarium also had an interesting connection to their pheromones. If killed, the Antlion Guardian released an odor that left the larvae unusable for the extraction process that the Vortigaunt used. Therefore, whenever someone or something entered a nest to steal the larvae, they had to avoid the Guardian entirely. These deeper regions of the colonies were darker than the rest, so this task became a little easier to detect a Guardian, as their skin had bioluminescent qualities that lit up the hallways as they wandered. Although the largest and arguably most dangerous of the Antlion species, the vast majority of the population of the wasteland would never see an Antlion Guardian, and if they ever did, it would likely be the last thing they ever saw. These Antlion colonies operated almost perfectly. Each subspecies had a part to play, just like a well-oiled machine. Over the years, the Antlion constructed more nests as they took over more land. This was a growing problem for the population of the wasteland. However, they could also quite possibly become a great resource for the Resistance against the Combine in the future. Approximately 20 years after the initial Combine invasion, the Antlion had expanded their nests exponentially. To protect their settlements, the Combine enforced even more thumpers to stop the Antlion from swarming these locations. The species wanted to expand, and at points, Antlion guards even joined the soldiers. On the coast, the Resistance suddenly had a new fire under them. A scientist that had stopped and survived the resonance cascade had made a reappearance after his disappearance almost 2 decades before. This had turned him into the symbol of revolution, and he made it his mission to help in this fight. At one point, the leader of the resistance was captured by the Combine and sent to a Combine stronghold, Nova Prospekt. So, the symbol, Gordon Freeman, ventured the coast to save him. On his way there, Gordon encountered 2 refugees that warned him not to touch the sand. Unfortunately, these 2 refugees fell to the Antlion soldiers that patiently waited for their next hunt, but Gordon managed to protect himself from the swarms of soldiers that attempted to take him. He even encountered an Antlion guard that had come to help out the Antlion soldiers. As a man that had learned to adapt and survive in any situation, he fought with and killed the guard. This fight took place very close to a resistance base, and with a dead Antlion guard available, one of the Vortigaunt inside struck it with lightning and created a theropod for Gordon to use on his journey. Gordon continued on his path to Nova Prospekt and used the theropod to recruit Antlions to his cause. The Combine prison soldiers that defended the prison struggled to fight against the constant swarm of Antlion, and after Gordon deactivated each thumper around the prison, it was only a matter of time before the rest of the Antlion came to claim this plot of land for themselves. Weeks after, the Resistance attempted to claim back City 17, and after the success of the Antlion in the Battle of Nova Prospekt, the Resistance sabotaged the Combine's thumpers across the city. This once again allowed the Antlion to burrow and fly in. Over the following hours, the Combine struggled to fight back as their numbers dwindled against the constant swarms of Antlion soldier, Antlion guard, and the firepower of the Resistance. Once again, the Antlion were used as soldiers in a war they were not aware they were even part of. Shortly after, the Combine accepted that they had lost control of the city and instead attempted to evacuate. The Antlion were an essential force in the Battle of City 17. Who knows how successful the Resistance would have been without them. The Antlion species once lived on their own world, and although they were farmed by the Vortigaunt, they mostly lived in harmony. After the Combine Great War, they attempted to create a new home on Xen, and then later on planet Earth. Just like the Vortigaunt, it appeared that the Antlion could not catch a break from war. The Antlion occupation, or should I say infestation, of planet Earth became one of the biggest pest problems that the Combine and mankind had to deal with many miles of deep colonies underground. The Antlion are one of those species that will likely never go away. Regardless of the procedures and technology that the Combine put in place to keep the Antlion away from important locations, it appears that the Resistance had figured out a key piece in the puzzle to overwhelm this multi-dimensional dominating force. Simply destroy their technology to allow the Antlion to swarm a location. The Antlion would get this new location to continue building their colonies, and the Resistance would have another victory of another broken Combine stronghold. The Antlion may be one of the most dangerous and terrifying creatures in the Half-Life universe, and as the war continues to rage on, they are not going anywhere. They had caused so much death to those that had trespassed on their land, but their larval extract did save the life of a key Resistance member, Alyx Vance, even if it was against their wishes. So, in a way, they did have a positive influence on the world overall. Here we explore in the lore and story behind the Cremators in the Half-Life 2 beta. Shortly after the Black Mesa incident, the vast population of planet Earth discovered that life existed on other worlds. However, this life was not kind. It was hostile and wanted to claim the planet for themselves. As the world's armies fought against the Xenian flora and fauna that had travelled to Earth by portal storms, humanity grew weaker and weaker as they fought them off. The situation became dire when the Combine discovered the planet. They had a more coordinated attack and used their resources to weaken Earth's armies further. For the next 7 hours, the population of Earth was decimated. That was until a deal was made with this dominating force. Humanity offered their submission in return for their lives. The Combine had conquered many species at this point in their quest to dominate the multiverse, but this planet was not as simple as they had once thought. The majority of humanity did fall into their new, submissive roles and followed orders, but the Xenian creatures that had arrived just before their war became an ongoing problem that was not too easy to solve. The Xenian infestation spread across the whole of the planet, and it even managed to get into parts of the Combine-controlled strongholds they had developed to hold their newly captured species. Headcrabs, barnacles, and fungi spread quickly. This made these areas extremely dangerous, not only for the humans, but also for the Combine workers. With this growing problem, the Combine had to create something that would help them with the Xenian problem, as well as a rising resistance. Over the years, the Combine formed factories across their cities. In these, they developed items to keep the humans in line and increase their hold over the planet. The worst part about this was that they forced children to work inside of them. In one of these factories, the children worked on a Combine force known as the Cremator. The details of the creation of this creature still is kept mostly secret by the Combine. However, what is known is that the children in the Cremator factories were in charge of the formation of their heads. Upon completion, this orb was attached to a body. It is unknown whether the Cremator was yet another one of the Combine's transhuman accomplishments, as their body was hidden by a long coat. But just like the Stalker, it did have a humanoid appearance and was heard breathing heavily. This meant that it was somewhat still of an organic nature, as the creatures did have long human arms and hands, although these only consisted of 4 fingers. The Resistance theorized that these were human once, just brutally adapted, and their original heads were either improved by the children in the factories, or replaced entirely to combine the human part with Combine technology. In their towering presence, the most notable feature of the Cremator was their gun, the Immolator. This was designed to connect to a sphere through a hose. This sphere appeared to have been surgically placed inside the body of the creature, and from this receptacle, the Cremators used the acidic substance inside to power their weapon to complete its tasks across the city. The Cremators were an intimidating force across the cities and wasteland, and as the years passed, they became an essential part in keeping life running almost smoothly on a Combine-controlled Earth. But what did they do exactly? As the citizens wandered the dark streets, they avoided the Cremators on their journey. They were easy to spot and hear as their heavy breathing gave their presence away almost immediately. They had important tasks to do, ordered by the Combine, and no one would get in their way. The most important task by far was dealing with the ongoing Xenian infestation, and they were built perfectly to deal with this. Upon arrival in these infested regions, their almost surgical clothing kept them safe from additional transmission of Xenian matter. With their immolators, almost like a human flamethrower, they spread an acidic wave of plasma at anything that looked even remotely Xenian. This ammunition had been designed specifically to break down and destroy organic matter upon impact. This made their jobs fairly easy to complete, unless the region had been completely overridden by Xenian flora, in which it was just a time issue. The best part of this substance was that it left no trace of what was once there, and therefore completely reduced the risk of the infestation spreading further. This allowed new areas of the cities to be opened up to be developed for additional Combine activities. To keep new infestations out of Combine-controlled regions altogether, Cremators were stationed within train depots. Razor trains and regular transportation trains traveled across the wasteland from city to city, transporting goods and people. The wasteland was a barren, bleak desert as a result of the Combine's adaptation of the planet. However, Xenian creatures had also made it their home. There was a chance that any piece of this infestation could attach itself to the trains, so as they arrived in the depots, the Cremators were ordered to cleanse them with their immobilizers. Nothing organic would survive this. Over the years of Combine occupation, the alien force noticed that there was more and more resistance activities in the city. For the most part, their propaganda scattered across the wasteland kept the majority of humanity in fear and in line, but there were others who wanted the Combine gone. As time passed, the Resistance formed bases and attacked Combine strongholds in an attempt to attain technology and resources for their fight against the aliens. On many occasions, the Combine took them out and left their bodies on the streets. This became yet another job for the Cremators to deal with. They were essentially the equivalent of a Combine janitor. With their immobilizers, they fired at these once brave humans with their green energy plasma until there was nothing left. No trace that a fight had even taken place. The Cremators were workers for the Combine and focused only on their tasks. However, this did not stop the Resistance from attacking them, and just like other Combine entities, they too could die. If successful, the Resistance then had access to their weapons, a tool designed to cleanse the streets, but when used as a weapon to take on Combine forces, it was deadly. Other members of the Resistance were also noted to take the heads of the Cremators to use them as objects to throw in battle. Regardless, the creation of the Cremators is one of the Combine's best kept secrets. As far as we know, they could have once been human, adapted into janitors to clean up the mess of the Black Mesa incident. The creation of the Cremators is shrouded in mystery. They were essential in keeping the Xenian infestation from spreading into the safe regions of the wasteland that the Combine had created to hold humanity. They are also one of the many scrapped ideas from the Half-Life 2 beta that would still fit into the retail game perfectly. So maybe they were out there, cleaning the streets just out of view of the Resistance and the citizens. The Combine were capable of so much, and we likely only saw a fraction of what they had created in their short time on Earth. Maybe one day we will see the Cremators return.